Chapter 1470. They could see the endless eternal night in the distance. Not a single ray of light could be seen. It was as if there was no sun or stars. There was no light at all. Even the chi of the Great Path was difficult to manifest. Lin Yu and the others stood on the city wall and looked into the distance. They were very calm. This is the land of eternal night. It has never seen sunlight, the pavilion master said. This place has a huge suppression on cultivators. Perhaps a 9-step cultivator would only be able to exert the strength of a 6-step cultivator. There's also a kind of creature here that devours living things. It is called the Void. The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion said, "This used to be a graveyard. An unimaginable battle took place here, and countless experts were buried here. Just the periphery alone has countless experts at the 10th step. I don't know which era they were born from." The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion said slowly, "Could there have been an existence that surpassed the 10th step here?" Lin Yu couldn't help but ask. In his opinion, the 10th step was the peak existence. As far as he knew, the Tao Severing Realm was already the highest level. Only the legendary god of creation could possibly surpass this realm. However, based on what the pavilion master of the Divine Secret Pavilion had said, it seemed like there had once been an existence that surpassed the 10th step in this world. This was undoubtedly subversive to Lin Yu. It was beyond his understanding. "It's very likely," the pavilion master said directly. "However, only the acting divine master and a few others might know a little about this." Speaking of this, Lin Yu couldn't help but feel a ripple in his heart. The level of mystery of this world seemed to have exceeded Lin Yu's imagination. However, the most important thing now is to rescue the acting divine master and the others and eliminate all the forces that attacked our divine court, the pavilion master said. In response, the others nodded one after another. However, this was the most important thing now. The acting divine master and the others were now seriously injured and were in the ruins. No one knew whether they were alive or dead. Let those forces know what it means to not touch them. Sheng Lu's eyes revealed a clear, murderous intent. That relic was discovered by our divine court for countless years. However, the seal only loosened slightly in the current era. However, it has been coveted by several other forces for a long time. I didn't expect them to dare to do such a thing, said the pavilion lord of the Divine Secret Pavilion. Kill them all, including the forces behind them. Crow said, although the divine court has declined in this world, it is not something that a force in this small place can offend. The few of them jumped off the city wall and stepped into the darkness. When Lin Yu arrived here, he couldn't help but feel a sense of familiarity. Lin Yu couldn't help but frown. This place seems to be very similar to the ancestral land and the land of origin. This discovery was undoubtedly terrifying for Lin Yu. It seems that the origin ground has a lot to do with this place, Lin Yu muttered. This was something he needed to discover. He wanted to know how this place was related to the land of origin. This would be of great benefit to him when he went to the land of origin and fought against the strange creatures. After Lin Yu and the others set foot in this place, all they could see was darkness and ruins everywhere. It seemed that this place was once a continuous building that was very ancient. The specific age could no longer be determined. I'm afraid that the age of the buildings here has spanned several eras. It was Sheng's first time coming to the unknown place. At this time, looking at the ruins, he couldn't help but be surprised. How many eras? Little kid, go back and read more ancient books. Otherwise, when you go out, people will say that the people of the divine court have no knowledge, Crow said disdainfully. He scolded Sheng without giving him any face. Then tell me, which era is this building from? Sheng was not to be outdone. The unknown place was incomparably mysterious. In the ancient books, there were only a few records. It wasn't that Sheng didn't know about it, but he had never obtained any useful information. It's true that the age of this place can't be determined. However, the ruins left here are definitely not as simple as a few years ago. Crow said, Do you know why this place is called the Land of Evernight? Sheng shook his head. Although he was very stubborn, he knew very little about the Land of Evernight. He almost didn't have a specific understanding. This used to be a graveyard. Countless years ago, this was the place where the bones of experts were buried. Therefore, after being infected by the aura of countless experts, this place entered the land of Evernight. There is no trace of sunlight, Crow said slowly. He seemed to be reminiscing. TSK, I know that too. After hearing Crow's words, Sheng just shook his head in disdain. I haven't finished speaking. Little kid, don't disturb me, Lu Yu continued. In response, Lin Yu and the Pavilion of Divination listened carefully. They knew very little about the land of Evernight. They all knew that Crow's origin was extremely ancient. He definitely wasn't talking nonsense when he mentioned the land of Evernight. The North Star ancient country is just a small place. It's just a continent formed by the land of Evernight. The vastness of this world is far beyond your imagination. Crow mentioned the structure of this world for the first time. However, from his tone, it seemed like the North Star ancient country was just a grain of rice to him. Lu Yu seemed to have seen a much bigger place. The formation of the land of Evernight is even more ancient than the birth of the Divine Court. It has a huge connection with two supreme powers. However, knowing so much now is obviously not good for you guys. Crow didn't continue. However, from Lu Yu's tone, Lin Yu and the rest got some useful information. The land of Evernight was actually formed by the war between two supreme powers. What kind of power could cause such destruction? This is a graveyard. At the same time, it's also a place for refining corpses. Legend has it that in a certain era, the experts buried here would revive and reappear in the world, Crow said faintly. Just as the few of them were discussing as they walked, a sudden change occurred. In one of the ruins, a few gray auras suddenly appeared, bringing with them an ominous power. A strange roar was heard. The gray auras quickly condensed into a few indescribable things. When they saw Lin Yu and the rest, they immediately pounced on them. Their fangs were deep, and their fingernails were like sharp blades. The ground was like tofu that was cut open. These indescribable things each had the strength of a six-step cultivator. Right now, their cultivation bases were being suppressed. At most, they could only display the strength of a six-step cultivator. Lin Yu took a step forward without the slightest hesitation. However, when he used his cultivation base, he discovered something miraculous. His cultivation base did not seem to be suppressed to the sixth step like the pavilion master of the Divine Secret Pavilion had said. He could still use the strength of a seven-step cultivator. However, he didn't show it too much. This was just the strength of a six-step cultivator. To Lin Yu, even if he used his six-step cultivation, it was still a piece of cake. However, the strange auras on them were a little troublesome. If they were tainted, they might be in trouble. Chapter 1471. The surrounding environment was the best proof. It could be seen that the moment those indescribable things appeared, the surrounding land was corroded and turned into ashes, carrying some kind of polluting property. These ruins are the condensation of the negative substances left behind by the previous experts. They can no longer be considered living things. Lin Yu, be careful, the pavilion lord reminded. Lin Yu nodded. These strange creatures had similar characteristics to the ones Lin Yu encountered in the origin ground. He was very experienced in dealing with them. The power of the ancient characters lingered around his body, isolating the polluted aura from his body. In less than 15 minutes, Lin Yu had killed all the indescribable things here. The gray aura dissipated. Lin Yu stood quietly on the spot, looking at the drop of gray liquid on his fingertip. His eyes were constantly analyzing it. He was using his universe fire and burial eyes to cultivate his eyes. He wanted to comprehend the origin of this gray substance. In the end, Lin Yu felt pain in his eyes. He didn't get the result he wanted. Lin Yu, this gray substance must not be contaminated, the pavilion lord reminded. He looked at the residue of the gray substance on Lin Yu's fingertip and couldn't help but be shocked. However, Lu Yu stood calmly at the side. He seemed to have known that the substance here couldn't cause any substantial harm to Lin Yu. Is it really the mysterious characters? Lu Yu muttered to himself. His eyes were filled with curiosity. Lin Yu didn't care too much about this. He had never told anyone that he had mastered the origin ancient characters. The people of the divine court didn't have any malicious intentions towards Lin Yu. Hence, he wasn't afraid of being exposed. More importantly, there weren't many people in the entire North Star ancient country who could pose a threat to him. I'm getting more and more curious about this kid, Lu Yu said indifferently. After Lin Yu dealt with the indescribable things here, the group of people left. They stopped for a moment and then quickly left. There was no telling how many of them there were in the Evernight continent. In order to avoid the appearance of undefeatable things, Lin Yu and the others were walking very cautiously. Even though Lin Yu now had the origin ancient characters, the living beings here were formed from the negative matter left behind by countless 10-step powerhouses. Therefore, he still needed to be very careful. The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion had already taken out an ancient map, which recorded the location of the ruins. The few of them were following a set of coordinates on the ancient scroll and were moving forward quickly. Just like that, a month passed. Although they had encountered a few waves of attacks from those things, Lin Yu had managed to neutralize them all without any mishaps. Thanks to Lin Yu's explanation, the Pavilion Lord of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion took out a tortoise shell to defend against the indescribable thing. The patterns recorded on the tortoise shell were similar to the origin ancient characters. Therefore, it was very effective in restraining the things here. Lin Yu was alone in front, while Lu Yu, the Pavilion Lord of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion, and Sheng were behind Lin Yu with the tortoise shell in hand. They were already close to the depths of the Evernight continent. All the light had disappeared completely. The group could only move forward slowly by relying on their divine sense. However, at this moment, Crow took out an item that emitted a faint light that illuminated an area. He held a black stick in his hand. However, as Lu Yu poured his divine power into it, it began to emit light. This item was very mystical, far surpassing ordinary magic treasures. The Pavilion Lord of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion had already tried it before. Apart from the tortoise shell that could illuminate a small area, nothing else could show its power here. This item of yours is not bad. Sheng's eyes shone brightly. After coming to the Evernight continent, Sheng was the only one who did not have anything that could protect him. When he saw the item on Lu Yu's body, his eyes revealed a greedy look. You took so many things from me before. It's time to return them, Sheng said directly. To be honest, I don't even care about those things of yours, Lu Yu said disdainfully. Then you ate it too. Now give me an item, Sheng Si said shamelessly. Lu Yu ignored him. The group continued to move forward. However, in the end, Lu Yu could not stand Sheng's pestering. In the end, Lu Yu threw down the black stick and handed it to Sheng. That's more like it. Sheng nodded in satisfaction. He stroked the black stick with both hands. He was reluctant to part with it. To be able to emit light in the Evernight continent, this item was definitely extraordinary. However, after Sheng took the black stick, Lu Yu took out 3 more sticks that were exactly the same. Sheng could not help but be speechless. How many more of these black sticks do you have? Sheng asked with a dark face. Not many, not many. I only have a few dozen, Lu Yu said disdainfully. He looked at Sheng with a look of disdain, as if he had never seen the world. I hope you can work harder. You should know that the Divine Court has never accepted trash, Lu Yu said. Back in the day, the Divine Court was an invincible hero who dominated an era. In this generation, it has really declined. Even such a person is accepted. As he said, Lu Yu did not forget to glance at Sheng. The disdain in his eyes was undisguised. Don't force me. Sheng's face was dark. Although he was often scolded by Lu Yu, he had never admitted defeat. At this time, he was not willing to be outdone and said, You're only at the 6th step. Your body is just a little stronger. Be careful. I'll teach you a lesson. Sheng waved his fist as if he would attack at any moment. The 6th step is not enough to suppress you. I just fell into a deep sleep for too long, causing my realm to drop. If I recover, I'll dominate the world. No one in the entire world can stop me. Lu Yu raised his head and was very proud. After that, he did not forget to scold Sheng. Look at you. After decades of cultivation, you're only at the 7th step. When I was in charge of the divine court, I had already slapped you to death. Try it now. Be careful, or I'll pull out all your ahog, Shung said. How can you talk to the ancestor like that? Liu questioned. You're taking advantage of your seniority. Shung did not give him any face at all. At this time, he had the intention to attack. Okay, don't forget the important thing. Senior, don't argue with a child. The pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion came out to smooth things over. Humph! The two turned their heads to the side at the same time. At this time, Lin Yu took out a map. After confirming the location, he said slowly, "It seems that we're only a few hundred miles away from there." They looked into the distance. There was a white light in front of them, illuminating a large area. There were particles floating on it. That should be the ruins that have already been opened. The pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion said. So it's here. Liu nodded. You know this place? Shung said with bad intentions. The owner of this ruins was not even worthy of carrying my shoes back then. Liu ignored him and said indifferently, Look at yourself now. How dare you say such words? Shung said in disdain. The two of them bickered for a long time. It was only when they saw the ruins that they stopped bickering. We're close to the ruins. There are people from a Gokchen ancient country inside. Don't expose yourself. The pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion reminded. Although the two of them did not get along, they still knew who was more important. Therefore, they kept quiet. However, their eyes were still filled with disdain. Chapter 1472. They climbed up a deserted mountain range. There were no plants, and the rocks were bare. They could see a white light in the depths of the ruins. It shot up into the sky with a sense of holiness, making the gray matter here unable to get close. There was no longer that indescribable thing here. Only a few people seemed to be sitting cross-legged outside the ruins. They looked very old and seemed to be the oldest existences in the big factions. They had lived for thousands of years and had reached the limit of their lifespan. They were all old monsters who were close to decaying. They came from the big factions in the North Star ancient nation. These old monsters who were about to die would try to enter the land of Evernight at the end of their lives to find a chance to live. It seemed that these old monsters had gotten the news a long time ago. They knew that there was a ruin here. That was why they attacked from behind when the Divine Court made their move. They were undoubtedly experts in the 9th step, but their chi and blood had declined. Some of them were at the 3rd level. The 3rd level was also a big enemy for Lin Yu. After the 9th step, every level was a different level. The difference was very obvious. Lin Yu had just entered the 9th step. Although his chi and blood were vigorous and he was at his peak, it was still difficult for him to face someone at the 3rd level. Those who had reached this step in thousands of years were all amazing talents. Their mastery of their own Tao had reached the pinnacle. None of them were much weaker than him. These old fellows. Shung's face was filled with resentment. He had joined the Divine Court for a long time. Now that he knew about the changes in the land of Evernight, he couldn't help but curse these people for being shameless. If these people aren't enough to sneak up on the acting Divine Lord, it seems that there are more powerful existences in the ruins, the pavilion master of the Divine Secret Pavilion said. The acting Divine Lord had reached the 5th level of the 9th step. Logically speaking, even if it took a lot of effort to open the ruins, these people shouldn't be able to sneak up on him. The gap between each level of the 9th step was terrifying. Even an expert at the 2nd or 3rd level of the 9th step was just an ant in front of an exhausted 5th level. It's better to be careful. Let's sneak in first. Liu didn't act carelessly. Let's find the acting Divine Lord. The others nodded. The Divine Court had a treasure that could hide one's aura. It was that outfit. At this time, Lin Yu was also wearing the uniform of the Divine Court. All the heavenly secrets had been concealed. Shung had always been wearing it. Therefore, even Lin Yu could not detect Shung's original appearance. This kind of clothing was very mysterious. No one knew who made it. Even though Lin Yu's divine telekinesis had reached the 5th level, it was still difficult for him to detect anything. The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion was deducing the location of the ruins. Liu only glanced at him with disdain and said indifferently, "Champ position, life gate." Liu pointed out. The Heavenly Secrets Pavilion's pavilion master frowned slightly. After one final confirmation, the Qin position was indeed the life gate. Many thanks, Senior. The pavilion master cupped his fists and said, You still have a long way to go. Liu said sincerely. His eyes were filled with vicissitudes and profoundness. Isn't it just learning about the ruins? There is nothing to be proud of, Sheng said. As if being exposed, Liu was a little flustered and exasperated. He said, Kid, don't meddle in the affairs of the elders. Okay, Sheng responded absent-mindedly. The few of them bypassed the guards and went to the life gate. If the acting divine master and the others came to ask me why we paid such a huge price. Liu looked at the broken talisman on the ground and could not help but feel bitter. However, the few of them did not stay there. Instead, they went straight in one direction. There was a majestic aura here. If some people came here, they would never think that this was the location of a life gate of the ruins. The few of them used their strongest means. Lin Yu used the power of the ancient characters to temporarily suppress the majestic aura here. There was a mountain range in front of them. As Liu Yu raised his hand, the stones on the mountain range began to collapse and gradually became illusory. A door was revealed. Without any hesitation, the few of them stepped into it. The environment here changed, and the stars changed. The few of them seemed to have come to another world. Although it was still a desolate place, there was an additional life force. It was very hidden, but could be clearly sensed. The life force was very strong. Even though the few of them were at the entrance of the ruins, they could still clearly sense it. I can feel the life force here. Could it be that the people inside are not dead? Sheng said in surprise. At this time, he was absorbing the life force. Even though it was just a little bit, he could feel that his fate will seem to have become much stronger. As I said, this is a place to raise corpses. Liu Yu said, The people here are already dead. They are just using the land of eternal night to find an opportunity to revive. Liu Yu said indifferently. Even though this was the graveyard of a 10th step expert, he did not have the slightest fear. It was as if he was really not afraid of a 10th step expert. There was no fear from the bottom of his heart. This time, Sheng did not argue with him because this place had given him a great shock. Now, he was still tirelessly absorbing the life force here. Life force was too important to the cultivators in this world. Without longevity, time was undoubtedly the most important thing to step into a higher realm within a few thousand years. You have no ambition. Liu Yu looked at Sheng and said disdainfully. However, he quickly used his Dharma artifact and began to collect the life force here. Didn't you have no ambition? Sheng said with disdain. I am different from you, Liu Yu said without blushing or skipping a beat. Lin Yu and the pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion just watched the two of them bicker indifferently. However, they were still moving forward. A few days passed. The few of them saw the traces of a battle. There were still remnants of divine power and dried blood. The acting divine master fought with them here. The pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion judged. The traces of a battle here were very new. It seemed to have happened just 1 or 2 months ago. Although the blood had dried up, it still had vitality. The pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion found a place, collected the dried blood, and placed it on the tortoise shell. As a divine fire rose, the divine fire curved and gradually pointed in a direction. The acting divine master has gone deep into the west. The pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion said, Wait, just as the few of them were about to enter the depths. However, Lin Yu called out to them. The 3 of them stopped. They heard a heart-palpitating sound coming from the depths of the tunnel. It seemed to be the footsteps of something. It was unknown if it was a creature. Rustle, rustle. However, to their ears it was horrifying. Otherworldly soldiers. After Liu Yu calmed his mind, he identified the source of the sound. He said directly, It seems that the creature here is really close to success. There are no problems. The otherworldly soldiers are still ahead. We don't have to worry. As he said that, Liu Yu frowned. He had learned from the otherworldly soldiers that the creature in this ruin was really about to revive. However, Liu Yu only worried for a short while. They continued forward. Suddenly, several groups of decaying creatures appeared in the tunnel. They were all wearing broken armor. They looked very ancient and had a decaying aura. Chapter 1473. As they moved forward, all the vitality in this place was devoured. Ghost soldiers of unknown age suddenly appeared in the passage. Their figures were very illusory, existing between reality and nothingness. As they appeared, they could see that the passage was decaying. The relics built by the 10th step experts, which had existed since ancient times, were aging continuously. The walls were turning into fine powder, rustling and falling. This was undoubtedly extremely terrifying for Sheng and the others. Even though they were dozens of feet away from each other, they could still feel their own life force. It was as if it had been frozen and was continuously fading away. "Calm down," Liu reminded them. He took out 30 black rods in a row and circled them around their bodies. Only then was he able to resist the decaying aura. At this time, even Lin Yu, who had a strong combat constitution, felt threatened by this aura. It was as if this was a power that had transcended all the world and could decay everything. The ghost soldiers moved very slowly, but they did not sense the existence of Lin Yu and the others. After passing by them, they directly left and disappeared into the wall. Nothing in this world could stop them. The ghost soldiers kept moving in one direction, with no starting point or destination. I didn't expect the ghost soldiers to appear. Liu Yu watched the ghost soldiers leave with a worried look in his eyes. Ghost soldiers, what do they represent? Lin Yu asked. Liu Yu had lived for an unknown number of years. If even he felt worried, it would definitely be a shocking matter. The calamity of reincarnation. Liu Yu only said a few words indifferently. There seemed to be some kind of magic in his words. After the last ghost soldier heard Liu Yu's words, he suddenly turned around and his mouth moved, as if he had discovered the existence of Lin Yu and the others. They seem to have discovered us. Being stared at by the ghost soldiers, Sheng felt goosebumps all over his body, and a chill ran down his spine. "Humph, you're just a puppet. Even your master has no right to question me." Liu Yu snorted coldly. Sheng looked at him in shock. Liu Yu took out a black rod and suddenly threw it towards the last ghost soldier. After being touched by the black rod, the ghost soldier began to appear, and the decaying skin on his face began to rustle. In the end, it turned into a pile of illusory powder blending into the void. "How dare you kill the ghost soldiers?" Sheng was extremely shocked. However, Liu Yu did not show any signs of joking. He said directly, "How many ghost soldiers have I killed in the past?" Sheng was speechless, only shocked. At this time, Lin Yu stood aside. After seeing the ghost soldiers, he had a guess in his heart. What was the relationship between the ghost soldiers and the land of reincarnation? Or was there a connection between the path that connected the land of origin in this world, which was the path of reincarnation, and the Yin soldiers? Lin Yu didn't have a clue about this. After the commotion was resolved, they continued on their journey. "Liu Yu, do you know about the land of reincarnation?" Lin Yu couldn't help but ask. If the ghost soldiers here were related to the land of reincarnation, it meant that when the ghost soldiers first entered the land of origin, there was a connection. Perhaps they were of the same origin. In other words, the connection between this world and the land of origin was closer than Lin Yu had imagined. Land of reincarnation? Liu Yu fell in a deep thought. He couldn't help but ask, which land of reincarnation are you talking about? There's more than one land of reincarnation. Lin Yu was puzzled. The land of reincarnation has an ancient path that has existed since ancient times, and also a land of reincarnation that was built by later generations. Liu Yu said. Lin Yu didn't know whether the land of reincarnation in his memory was built in later generations or since ancient times. Stone City, Lin Yu finally said. Stone City, the land of reincarnation that was built in later generations. Liu Yu couldn't help but fall in a deep thought. I know a little, but not much. After I fell into a deep sleep, the land of reincarnation was built. Liu Yu said slowly, it's the land of reincarnation. I don't even know where it is. However, the land of reincarnation was built to fight against the corrupted land of reincarnation. Liu Yu said slowly. This undoubtedly made Lin Yu's heart tremble slightly. He came from the land of reincarnation. Could it be that he had been set up by someone? Liu didn't know what happened after that. Therefore, Linyu didn't ask further. The land of reincarnation that has existed since ancient times has already been destroyed. The Yin soldiers that have appeared here are merely those that fell from that path. Someone has always wanted to regain control of the land of reincarnation. This is a huge matter for all living beings. Many years ago, they were stopped. However, it seems like that person has already awakened. Liu said slowly. His eyes were filled with worry. We can only wait for the future, Liu said in the end. Now, he didn't have any way to solve this matter. After all, he was seriously injured back then and hadn't recovered until now. After saying that, Liu looked at Linyu. There was a sense of vicissitudes in his eyes. This wasn't an act. He seemed to have known everything long ago. It was just that he didn't point it out in front of Linyu. Linyu didn't ask further. After spending half a month, they finally reached the depths of the ruins. 5 decaying figures appeared in front of them. There was a strong aura of death on their bodies, surrounded by that gray substance. The power displayed by these people was extraordinary. They were all existences at the 5th level of the 9th step. However, there seemed to be some kind of evil in their eyes. Apparently, they had been eroded by the aura of the land of Evernight. It seemed that they had completely fallen and only a trace of consciousness was left. That person from the Divine Court organization still hasn't appeared. The few people who were sitting cross-legged said, slowly. Their consciousness spread out to an extremely far distance. Linyu's consciousness wasn't inferior to theirs. He already knew of their existence when he entered this space. At this time, they were hiding in the dark, watching these people closely. These people have fallen into darkness. Liu said indifferently. The future generations didn't expect that someone would also set foot on this path. For longevity, Liu's eyes were filled with disdain. They have forgotten how much the experts back then paid to completely suppress this aura. I didn't expect that in the future, there would be their descendants who absorbed this aura again. Liu said, we didn't find that remnant of the Divine Court organization. One of them said slowly. It could be seen that his eye sockets had disappeared. There was only endless darkness inside. It looked very terrifying. In order to survive in the land of Evernight, they had become neither human nor ghost. Linyu looked at them with a deep frown. Although they were close to decaying, the suppression here was much smaller. Their realm was still at the peak of the 7th step. For Linyu, dealing with one person might not be a problem, but facing 5 at the same time was undoubtedly a huge pressure. They're here. At this time, one of them looked at Linyu and the others with empty eyes. We've been discovered. Being stared at by those empty eyes, Shang felt a chill down his spine. For a moment, he felt like he couldn't take a step forward. Chapter 1474. Facing the elder's gaze, he felt as if he had fallen into an abyss. His heart palpitated, and even his divine consciousness seemed to have been devoured. Since we've been discovered, let's fight, Linyu said indifferently. By the time Linyu spoke, the old men had already locked onto their location. Linyu took a step forward and arrived at the center of the field. Although Linyu was now suppressed, he could still display the power of the 7th step. He looked at the people in the field with an indifferent expression. Liu also came to the field and stood on Linyu's shoulder. His eyes were filled with disdain as he said, "Did you ask your ancestors before you fell into darkness? In order to pursue that short lifespan, you become neither human nor ghost. Is it worth it?" The elders looked at Linyu and the other 3 with a mocking smile. Remnants of the Divine Court organization, we're dedicated to the Tao, but time has been merciless. You're just an old crow. How can you understand us? Liu hated it when people called him an old crow. His eyes gradually turned cold. Since they're from the Divine Court organization, let's cripple them first and take them as hostages to let the Divine Master come out, an elder suggested. Their bodies exuded a decaying aura. Their eyes were sunken, and there were no pupils in them. They looked very strange. Linyu looked at them indifferently and said, "Cripple us. Let's see if you have the strength to do so." Linyu waved his hand, and the universe fire appeared, turning into a Tao pagoda that protected him and the pavilion master of the heavenly secret pavilion. "Lu Yu, are you okay?" Lin Yu asked. He could clearly feel that after Lu Yu entered here, his strength didn't seem to be suppressed. At this time, he was still at the peak of the sixth step. Coupled with his powerful physical body, it was no problem for him to hold one person back. Without waiting for Lu Yu's reply, Lin Yu made his move. Lin Yu did not dare to be careless in the face of someone who was several levels higher than him. He directly used the power of the origin characters. Several ancient characters circled around his body, releasing a dense radiance. They dispersed the gray matter here and devoured it. It's this kind of power. The elders were clearly shocked when they saw Lin Yu use the ancient characters. "This child cannot be left alive," someone said, directly taking action. A gray substance could be seen in their hands. Compared to the indescribable thing outside, the aura it possessed was even more intense. They seemed to have grasped the origin of the gray substance and were about to merge with their bodies. Even if Lin Yu used the power of the ancient word, it would be difficult for him to suppress it in a short period of time. An old man went up against Lu Yu. Lu Yu was shocked and couldn't help but shout, "Brat, you think too highly of me." He was only at the sixth step. Although he was not suppressed, he was still behind the old man here. However, even though Lu Yu was yelling, he still attacked mercilessly. It was only to see 45 black sticks revolve around his body, transforming into many forms. At the same time, he flapped his large wings and actually repelled that old man in a short period of time. Lu Yu's strength was even stronger than Lin Yu imagined. But this was only a matter of a short period of time. Lu Yu's realm did not recover in the end. Even if he grasped the black sticks, this great killing weapon, in the end, he could still only resist with difficulty. Were we too impulsive? Lu Yu cried out strangely. At this time, he did not forget to launch a counterattack in the process of defending. But now, Lin Yu already had no time to care about other things when facing four powerhouses. Universe fire and burial ice revolve around his body. All kinds of means were already used. The few elders also no longer suppressed their realms. They were practically already late-stage 8th step. This made Lin Yu very passive right now. Resisting stubbornly, "I don't know where you all get the courage to dare show up here," an old man said coldly. Lin Yu was repelled back a few steps. Wiping away the blood at the corner of his mouth, he did not say anything. The two of them were incomparably shocked. Now, Lin Yu and Lu Yu had both fallen into a passive state. If nothing unexpected happened, it would not be long before they were defeated. This was undoubtedly a dead end. However, Lin Yu and Lu Yu's combat strength had far exceeded the elders' imagination. Even though their realms were much lower than theirs, they still had room to fight back. "These two cannot be left alive," one of the elders said. Especially the person who was fighting against Lu Yu. It was obvious that he wanted to kill him. He would not hesitate even if he had to grind Lu Yu's bones to dust, because Lu Yu had actually injured him in the process of fighting back. Moreover, after being pierced by the black stick, the wound on his body could not heal for a long time. This made him realize that the artifact Lu Yu used was definitely not simple. It could suppress the power they had obtained in the Evernight land. Lu Yu's feathers fell to the ground. "Old man, I want you to know how powerful your grandpa Lu is." Lu Yu looked at the feathers on the ground and lamented bitterly. He wanted nothing more than to skin the old man alive. "Think about whether you can survive first," the old man said coldly as he looked at the talkative Lu Yu. At this moment, Lin Yu was sent flying again. One could see that there was a gray gas on his shoulder that was constantly eroding him. "The situation is over. Give up resisting now, and I can let you die a better death." An old man stood in the sky and said indifferently. There was no emotion in his empty eye sockets. "Is that so?" Lin Yu stood up and said indifferently. At this moment, a sudden change occurred. Above the sky, a terrifying fluctuation erupted. In an instant, the entire space was shaking. A black-robed man descended from the sky and blasted a person into pieces in an instant. "How dare you act so presumptuously in my God's court organization?" The indifferent words shocked the old man. "Divine Master, You actually recovered in such a short time. The old men were shocked. The acting divine master of the God's Court organization was the strongest existence in the entire North Star ancient nation. Before the old men came into contact with the gray substance, they were already very wary of him. Otherwise, they would not have hidden for so long just to ambush the divine master. You've worked hard, the divine master said slowly as he looked at Linyu. In fact, the divine master had already contacted Linyu before this and asked him to delay the old men temporarily. Otherwise, Linyu would not have acted so rashly. Linyu nodded in response. How dare you target my God's Court organization? You're quite bold, the divine master said. With a wave of his hand, a formation appeared on the ground and completely sealed off the area. Good lad, you even tricked me. Luyu looked at the formation on the ground and instantly understood everything. He said, so you already knew that they were going to ambush you. You just borrowed their strength and sacrificed them to open the ruins completely. The divine master was not injured because of the ambush. He had only spread false information to lure the old men out. Then he sacrificed them to obtain the items in the ruins completely. The divine master's plan had fooled everyone, including Lu Yu and the others. Senior, I'm sorry. After all, it's too difficult to find a 9-step cultivator in the North Star ancient nation. If I didn't do it, they wouldn't have come in, the divine master said apologetically. You tricked us. The old men were in disbelief. They did not expect that after plotting for so many years, they would be tricked in the end. Looking at the formation around them, they knew that they would not be able to leave today. A peak divine master was enough to kill all of them. Chapter 1475. Now that things have come to this, we can only fight, one of the patriarchs said slowly. The acting divine master looked down on the world with disdain. He was extremely calm and did not show the slightest bit of fear as he faced the attacks of the patriarchs. It seemed as if these people were no threat to him. You're just rats. Today, I'll sacrifice you all to the ruins, the acting divine master said slowly. He extended his right hand, and the power of heaven and earth started to gather towards him. He didn't use any forbidden techniques, but the power he exuded was enough to make everyone tremble in fear. The acting divine master was definitely an invincible existence in the entire North Star ancient country. His reputation had existed for thousands of years, and no one could shake it. Even though many powerhouses had reached the 9th step in the past thousands of years, they all kept their mouths shut and avoided the topic of the acting divine master on purpose. In the past, the North Star ancient country had also launched a punitive expedition against the divine court. However, for some unknown reason, the expedition was left unsettled. According to some people, the emperor of the North Star ancient country had either compromised or been defeated by the acting divine master. However, no one knew that the divine court had not taken over the North Star ancient country in the end. However, these were extremely deep secrets that outsiders did not know about. Lin Yu looked at the acting divine master. Great path runes flickered in his eyes as he analyzed the technique that the acting divine master had used. Although the acting divine master did not use any techniques, it seemed like an ordinary attack that even a 9-step powerhouse would not be able to withstand. Lin Yu knew that even if he used all his techniques, he would not be able to withstand a single attack from the acting divine master. Are you curious about how terrifying that kid's offensive power is? Lu Yu came to Lin Yu's side and said with a smile. He no longer looked as pathetic as before. Instead, he was in high spirits, as if victory was already within his grasp. What do you mean? Lin Yu asked. Indeed, that kid did not use any true mystique or technique. However, he has already cultivated a mystique that is close to the Tao, Lu Yu said faintly. This is something that a few peerless figures of the divine court discovered in a mysterious place, Lu Yu explained to Lin Yu. As a member of the divine court, Lin Yu was naturally qualified to do so. Lu Yu seemed to trust Lin Yu very much, so he told him everything he knew about the divine court, a divine ability that is close to the Tao. Lin Yu sank into his memories. It's not weaker than a 10th step expert's ultimate divine ability. It might even surpass it. In the end, Lu Yu said faintly, however, you will slowly understand the profoundness of this technique in the future. Lin Yu was slightly shocked. How terrifying was a spell that surpassed the 10th step? Are these spells still in the hands of the divine court? Lin Yu couldn't help asking. However, Lu Yu shook his head and said, they were lost in the previous battle. Now, the acting divine master has only mastered one of them. Since the divine court was so powerful back then, why did it end up like this in the end? Lin Yu was puzzled. You don't know how powerful the enemy that the divine court faced was. Lu Yu sighed faintly. Lin Yu didn't continue asking. The divine master's invincible power shocked everyone here. In less than an hour, the divine master killed everyone here. Then, the divine master collected their corpses and placed them in the array. As the flames of the way rose, runes that made one's heart palpitate appeared on the ground. They were very powerful and had a majestic aura. Looking at the runes was like looking at a majestic divine mountain. It was difficult to look directly at it. Everyone, lend me a hand, the divine master said. Kid, you have to give me an explanation when you go out, Lu Yu said. We'll each take a side. As he spoke, he went to the west side. Lin Yu, the pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion, and Sheng were in the other 4 directions. As they poured in their divine power, the corpses turned into ashes. The corpses of the old men began to turn into ashes, and the divine substance on their bodies slowly merged into the ground. Rumbling sounds were endless. They felt as if they were in the immortal realm. There was a strong vitality here. They felt as if they had ascended to immortality. However, this feeling was illusory and unrealistic. What's happening down there? Several experts, sitting cross-legged in the outside world, were shocked. Their patriarchs had all entered it to hunt down the divine lords of the divine court. Now that there was a sudden change, they were all extremely shocked. However, at this time, the ruins were once again sealed. Due to the influence of the relic, they didn't even know that the divine masters had died. They looked at their life slips at the same time. When they found that they were still lit, they were relieved and continued to guard the outside world. The divine court's master is already at the end of his rope. Perhaps the patriarchs have already killed him. Now that the real relic has been opened, we can obtain the fortune inside, someone said. The others nodded. Obviously, they agreed with this statement. It's a pity that we can't enter it, someone said with a sigh. When the patriarchs come out of seclusion, we will benefit greatly, someone comforted. After that, they closed their eyes again and extended their divine consciousness. At this time, the ground under the ruins had completely changed. Because of the endless vitality, many ancient strange plants grew on the ground. After an unknown amount of time, this place seemed to have turned into a barren land. However, since there were no living creatures, it still looked like an ancient book. The landscape of this place has changed. Sheng looked over and was shocked. Vigorous vitality surged. The few of them looked around. You're not blind. You can see it, Lu Yu said disdainfully. Sheng didn't argue with him. The divine master also descended from the sky. Greetings, divine master. Sheng bowed. Greetings, divine master. The pavilion of divine secrets bowed slightly to the divine master. No need for formalities, the divine master said calmly. The divine master was a middle-aged man. His face was chiseled, and he was very handsome. You must be Lin Yu. The divine master looked at Lin Yu with satisfaction. Yes, Lin Yu nodded. However, he only cupped his hands and didn't bow. The divine master didn't care at all. He looked into the distance and said calmly, "This is the original appearance of the relic. The thing we want is in the deepest part." Then the divine master pointed in a direction. "In that case, let's go." Lu Yu said, "This place is now occupied by the Yin soldiers. I don't know if the thing you want is still there." This was Lu Yu's concern. "We don't have much time left," Lu Yu said to the divine master. The divine master understood what Lu Yu meant. He had already seen the Yin soldiers before this. That lineage is the mortal enemy of the god's court. "I didn't expect them to invade this place," the divine master said. "That lineage has always been strange. It seems that the war will spread to the entire world," Lu Yu said slowly. "What is this?" Lu Yu asked as they moved forward. It should be the reincarnation talisman, the Divine Master said. The Divine Master didn't know what was inside. Lu Yu nodded and said, "It's a good thing." "What is the reincarnation talisman?" Lin Yu asked, puzzled. The reincarnation talisman can allow one to retain the memories of their previous life and safely embark on the path of reincarnation, Lu Yu said. However, Lin Yu wasn't interested in the effects of the stone. He thought that the reincarnation talisman could connect to the land of reincarnation. Could he use the reincarnation talisman to enter the land of reincarnation, then return to the land of origin? At this thought, Lin Yu was interested in the reincarnation talisman. Chapter 1476. Back then, this expert obtained more than one reincarnation talisman, but I don't know if there are more in his burial ground. The Divine Master didn't know much about this either. Is there no more reincarnation talisman in the Divine Court? Lu Yu asked. This was the first time he met the acting Divine Master after he woke up. However, he didn't feel distant at all. Instead, he asked directly. It's long gone. In that great battle, it was used by many people who died, the Divine Master said. However, he didn't experience that battle. He only knew about it from the records of the Divine Court. He also knew about the great use of the reincarnation talisman, so he planned for this for a long time. However, although your method succeeded, I'm a little disappointed, Lu Yu said indifferently. At this moment, his tone was serious. The Divine Master didn't say anything, accepting Lu Yu's criticism. The Divine Master of the Divine Court, even if he's just an acting Divine Master, is the second most powerful existence in the world. If you lack offerings, you could just capture a few. There's no need to scheme, Lu Yu lectured. Sigh. This generation's Divine Court seems to be in decline. Lu Yu sighed. He didn't seem to be joking. The Divine Master didn't refute this. He was the strongest expert in the entire North Star ancient nation, but he was still lacking if he wanted to be the most powerful expert in the world. He also deeply understood how terrifying the organization of the Divine Court was in the past. In his generation, it had declined a little. However, there was nothing he could do about it. This isn't your fault. The eastern foothill of the land of Evernight is too barren. Back then, we moved here to complete a certain task, Lu Yu said. He was just lecturing and didn't mean to blame him. Sheng didn't refute Lu Yu. He was very obedient in front of the Divine Master. It was rare for him to see the elusive Divine Master. Now that he saw him, he was naturally excited. And this kid is too weak. If he was in the previous Divine Court, he wouldn't even be qualified to carry his shoes. Lu Yu saw that the Divine Master didn't refute him and couldn't help but criticize Sheng. You? Sheng's eyes were filled with hatred. Senior, you're right, the Divine Master said. But Sheng's identity, the Divine Master didn't continue. Not long after, they arrived at the depths of this place. In the middle of a few huge black stone pillars, there was an area shrouded in gray fog. Vaguely, one could see that there seemed to be something swimming inside, giving off a heart-palpitating feeling. Within the gray fog, Tao and truth were intertwined. However, there was something strange about it. Everyone couldn't help but feel a chill down their spines. After Lin Yu and the others arrived, a certain power looked over. There seemed to be some kind of karma that directly eroded the origin of Lin Yu and the others. Lin Yu could see that under their gazes, their bodies seemed to be connected by some unknown thread. Lin Yu had a deep understanding of these threads. They were the threads of karma. However, there was a strange power attached to them. The Lord of the Divine Court had taken action, but he still couldn't get rid of the threads. Let me give it a try, Lin Yu said slowly. He took a step forward, and the power of karma appeared on his body. The stone sword in his hand was engraved with 9 ancient origin characters. Whoosh! It seemed that Lin Yu had just casually swung his sword, but it cut off some of the air. It didn't have any substantial effect. However, after Lin Yu swung his sword, the people on the ground felt relieved. The 4 of them felt their bodies relax. It was as if the corrosive power had disappeared in an instant. How mystical! Sheng was pleasantly surprised. Previously, he had regarded Lin Yu as someone of the same generation. However, after experiencing so many things, he was even more in awe of him. This degree of awe had almost surpassed that of the pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion. Where did he come from? Sheng couldn't help but wonder in his heart. Sheng wasn't considered a high-level member of the divine court, so he wasn't qualified to know Lin Yu's identity. However, now that he saw Lin Yu attack, he was even more curious. As expected, it's the power of Dao, Lu Yu said. How many Daos have you mastered? Lin Yu didn't answer or deny it. This place has been turned into a stronghold of the Nether soldiers. I don't know if the reincarnation talisman still exists inside. Lu Yu was puzzled. I'm afraid it's difficult to enter the stronghold of the Nether soldiers with our current strength. The divine master frowned for the first time. Lu Yu nodded. The Nether soldiers were existences on the reincarnation road with endless secrets. Now, this place had been turned into a stronghold. Lu Yu's strength hadn't recovered, so it would be difficult for him to really enter. It would be a huge risk. Lin Yu looked at the gray fog and didn't have the slightest confidence. Back then, I single-handedly defeated countless Nether soldiers. Now, this small stronghold is just a small thing that escaped from the reincarnation road. I can't do anything about it. Lu Yu was so anxious that he jumped. However, we must get the reincarnation talisman, the divine courtmaster said. We need to bring back the experts who were reincarnated because of the war back then. Lin Yu thought of the land of reincarnation on Earth. Back then, the first emperor had also asked him to bring the reincarnation talisman. Were the two talisman papers the same thing? But soon, Lin Yu shook his head. The reincarnation talisman here was related to the reincarnation road. And Earth was just a testing ground for the supreme evolution back then. In terms of power, it should be far inferior. Just as the few of them were at their wits' end. Suddenly, they saw a figure slowly walking out from the depths of the gray fog. Gradually, his figure became clear. The person who appeared had a stooped figure, gray clothes, and gray hair. It seemed that he had been completely contaminated by the gray matter. However, the aura on his body carried the characteristics of this world. It's you, kid. Lu Yu recognized the old man who appeared. However, Lu Yu frowned slightly. It was obvious that there was no sign of life on this figure. He had already been dead for an unknown amount of time. Now, he had appeared only because of his obsession. Was he once a member of the divine court? Shen couldn't help but ask. He could feel a huge pressure coming from the figure. This was definitely a powerhouse of the 10th step. Even though he had passed away for countless years, it was still enough to make people's hearts palpitate. They had the urge to kneel down and worship him. No, but back then, he was very close to the divine court. I didn't expect that he was the one who left the relic. Lu Yu said with melancholy. Is there really no one from our era who survived to this day? He couldn't help but look at the figure in the distance. The figure spread out his hands, interweaving Tao and truth. A strong reincarnation aura appeared. It actually caused the grayish gas in the area to temporarily dissipate by quite a bit. Reincarnation talisman papers. Sheng looked at the figure spread out his hands, and 3 talisman papers of different colors appeared. They carried a mighty force. Just by looking at them a few times, he could feel that he was about to be reborn. Sheng's eyes gradually blurred. With the appearance of the reincarnation talisman papers, everything on this land showed signs of extinction. This trend was irreversible. This reincarnation power is so rich. Lin Yu was slightly surprised. There seemed to be a kind of power in his body that was being drawn out. However, he quickly suppressed it. He had already completely mastered the Tao law of reincarnation. However, it was obviously not a good time to show it. There seemed to be a pair of eyes in the gray fog that were staring at him covetously. However, for some reason, when he saw the reincarnation talisman papers in front of the Divine Master and the others, he didn't stop them. Lin Yu's eyes were very sharp. The thing inside was definitely not something that could be defeated now. It would probably be very troublesome even if he broke through to the 10th step. The mystery of this world is far beyond my imagination. Lin Yu couldn't help but sigh. The talisman papers slowly came in front of the Divine Master and the others. Have you been guarding these reincarnation talisman papers? Lu Yu looked at the gray figure. His body had been corroded by the gray substance. He appeared now only because he sensed the arrival of the people from the divine court through his obsession. Chapter 1477. The gray figure didn't answer. Under everyone's gaze, layers of gray shells fell from his body. As he turned around, he returned to the gray fog and gradually turned into a pile of powder. Something inside attacked. Lin Yu couldn't help but murmur. He could clearly sense that there was something inside that was extremely powerful. It was definitely not the Yin soldier that Lu Yu mentioned. It was something else. "We can't stay here for long," Lin Yu said with a serious face. It was the first time Sheng and the pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion saw Lin Yu so serious. They couldn't help but ask, "What happened? Did you see what was inside?" Lu Yu took the talisman and looked at Lin Yu with a deep frown. Lin Yu nodded. It was because he had mastered the reincarnation great path. At this moment, he could feel the thing in the depths of the gray fog the most. If they stayed here any longer, they might be buried here. The divine master directly took out a tool, a bronze lamp that could disperse the gray energy around them. He began to be on guard. "I see. There's a big guy hibernating here." No wonder. Lu Yu understood everything. He immediately moved and shouted, "We can't fight against it now. Let's leave first." However, it won't come out in a short time. Facing Lin Yu's warning, they all looked serious, including the divine master. They quickly left this place. After an unknown amount of time, they arrived at the edge of the vestige. Lin Yu and the divine master guarded the back. However, they didn't know when, but a stream of gray blood flowed out from the corner of Lin Yu's mouth. His face was pale, and his aura became weak. His vitality was quickly fading. "Lin Yu, what happened?" Sheng turned his head and saw Lin Yu's condition. He couldn't help but turn pale with fright. They didn't know what had happened. Obviously, nothing had happened just now. However, they didn't know when Lin Yu had been injured. Moreover, there was a gray energy around him that was constantly eroding his body. "Don't get close." Lin Yu told everyone to stay away from him. Only he knew that before they left, the thing in the depths of the gray mist had attacked him. This method was extremely strange. Even Lin Yu was caught off guard. If he had not used the power of the reincarnation great path to suppress the gray aura deep within his body, he would have been corroded and fallen into darkness forever. This power, Lin Yu muttered to himself as he sat down cross-legged on the ground. This power, this method, seemed to be very similar to the power that had killed him back then. It also appeared out of nowhere. "I won't make the same mistake twice," Lin Yu said coldly in his heart. Back when he was in the origin grounds, the creature in the bronze coffin had used this method on him. He was helpless for the next few thousand years, and in the end, he had died in the secret grounds. If he hadn't sacrificed himself in the end, he might have died forever. As Lin Yu used the power of the reincarnation great path, the gray aura in his body was gradually disappearing. What kind of power does he have? He's only the 9th step, but he can suppress the gray aura? Even Lu Yu couldn't help but be shocked. The divine master's expression changed as well. They didn't know what kind of method Lin Yu had used to suppress the gray aura in his body. "Move away." Lu Yu saw that the gray aura in Lin Yu's body was gradually withdrawing. He seemed to have thought of something and immediately informed everyone. At the same time, Lu Yu took out 40 black rods and suppressed Lin Yu's surroundings. A mighty force appeared and supported Lin Yu. The few of them didn't dare to be careless. Just as they were about to withdraw, an even more terrifying gray aura erupted from Lin Yu's body. The two had different origins, but they seemed to be the same method. "Since you want to kill me, why don't I make use of this power to devour you instead?" Lin Yu had an epiphany. In fact, before he died, he had tried this method. However, he didn't have complete control of the reincarnation great path back then, so he couldn't do anything. However, at that moment, another strange power entered his body. Lin Yu seemed to have found the critical point. He activated the reincarnation great path and gathered the gray aura towards his abdomen. At the same time, the remaining gray aura that had killed him also appeared there. The two gray auras intertwined, but it was difficult for them to merge into one. It seemed that the Tao laws of the world were different. The two powers came from the same origin, but it was difficult for them to merge. Not only that, they seemed to be repelling each other. However, Lin Yu didn't care so much. The reincarnation Tao law turned into symbols of the origin. It suppressed the two gray auras separately. Then, the two gray auras slowly took shape. Finally, under Lin Yu's control, the two gray auras turned into two parts of the millstone. The reincarnation Great Path was added to it, forming the engravings. There was a sense of ancientness and vicissitudes. The millstone seemed to have existed here since ancient times. When Lin Yu opened his eyes, 2 months had passed. To Lin Yu, it seemed like only a moment. Give me a chance. Lin Yu stared at the center of the ruins and sneered. When the time comes, I will pay you back double, no matter what relationship you have with the bronze coffin creature in the origin place. The thing in the depths of the ruins seemed to be aware. Roar. The weak roar was indescribably eerie when it reached the ears of these people. Sheng, in particular, had wrinkles on his skin even though he had the protection of the Divine Master and the others. Cracks appeared on his skin, and he seemed to be dying. Lin Yu's eyes shone on Sheng's body. A gray aura appeared on Sheng's body. It directly entered Lin Yu's body. Then, the millstone in his body slowly turned, grinding the gray aura into nourishment. It could be seen that the power in Lin Yu's body seemed to have grown stronger. Thank you, Sheng said weakly. However, Lin Yu also saw Sheng's true appearance when he looked at him just now. What was surprising was that he was a woman. Moreover, he had a devastatingly beautiful appearance. In terms of beauty, he was probably not inferior to Lu Rushi and Yu Linglong. When Lu Yu saw the method Lin Yu used, he couldn't help but be surprised. He couldn't help but say, "You are using this power." "There is no problem," Lin Yu replied calmly. "This power represents the extreme strangeness." Lu Yu still had a worried expression as he said, "Since ancient times, there has been no lack of people who have wanted to borrow this power. However, in the end, all of them ended up in the same situation, becoming an indescribable member." Lu Yu came in front of Lin Yu and wanted to examine him carefully. "I see. You have come into contact with this gray substance before." Lu Yu was surprised. Lin Yu nodded. "However, you didn't mention the past and how he was eroded by the gray aura and died." Chapter 1478. The few of them opened the ruins. Along the way, Lu Yu said, "Although you're very familiar with this gray gas, I still advise you not to use it too much." Lu Yu warned him loyally. This was Lu Yu's good intention. Lin Yu also nodded. However, he did not know that Lin Yu had already used the Tao law of reincarnation to completely refine the gray gas into a millstone. He was not using this power, but was truly controlling it. "You guys leave first. I want to cultivate in this ruin for a while more," Lin Yu said to the few of them. Now that he had turned the gray gas into a millstone, he could absorb and refine the power here. The Yin soldiers here were the best nourishment for Lin Yu. Therefore, he wanted to strengthen his power here. He had been in this world for 5 or 6 years now. There was no need to delay any longer. After understanding more, he realized that the flow of time in this world seemed to be different from that in the origin land. It seemed to be much slower. He did not know how much time had passed in the origin land and the universe. Therefore, Lin Yu needed to return as soon as possible. Perhaps this was the place where he could truly attain his Tao. "Don't go near there," Lu Yu reminded him. At the mention of the place where the gray gas gathered, Lu Yu frowned. That place was filled with danger. He did not want Lin Yu to continue going there. Lin Yu nodded. He was well aware of this. Although Lin Yu had already neutralized the means that the thing had used on him, it was not something that Lin Yu could fight against it now. However, it did not mean that he could not do it in the future. "Since you've already made up your mind, I can't say anything else," Lu Yu said. "Come back alive," the Divine Master said. "Be careful," the Divine Master of the Divine Secret Pavilion said. After staying in the ruins for a few months, they also knew that this place was very dangerous. They could easily be eroded by the gray gas, and completely turn into a walking corpse. This was not what they wanted to see Lin Yu end up like. Lin Yu nodded in response to their good intentions. The Divine Lord called for Lin Yu alone. He handed the lamp over to Lin Yu and said, "Now, I will teach you my magical art, blazing heaven. This is related to the 10th step and beyond. You must study it well." The Divine Master didn't hold back at all as he imparted his own understanding of the blazing sky to Lin Yu. "Thank you, Divine Lord," Lin Yu said solemnly. The moment he came into contact with blazing heaven, he knew that this technique was not simple. Lin Yu was very grateful to the Divine Master for not holding anything back. He didn't know why the Divine Court was so good to him, but since the Divine Court was so kind to him, he didn't mind. Lin Yu wasn't a heartless person. He also knew what he had to do next. As the door to the ruins opened, the few of them left. One could see that the Divine Master's casual attacks had turned the few people who were guarding outside into blood mist. After seeing this scene, Lin Yu slowly turned around and entered the ruins once again. After traveling for a few days, as Lin Yu walked forward, he comprehended the blazing sky imparted by the Divine Master. As the gray mist in front of him began to surge, Lin Yu knew that it was the otherworldly soldiers passing through, and he had been waiting for this opportunity. Then, a few otherworldly soldiers wearing rotting armor slowly appeared in the passage. Lin Yu first hid his aura. Then, the otherworldly soldiers appeared beside him. Lin Yu immediately made his move. The power of the origin ancient word appeared on his stone sword. Chi! He slashed out with his sword. A few of the undead soldiers immediately turned into gray smoke, following which their illusionary figures turned into dust and began to dissipate. Lin Yu immediately took the gray mist into his hand. Then, without the slightest hesitation, he directly swallowed it. As the otherworldly soldier's pure gray mist entered his body, Lin Yu's eyes revealed a demonic look. His divine consciousness was affected for a short period of time. However, this was only temporary. Soon, Lin Yu crushed the gray mist with his own millstone, turning it into pure energy that entered his limbs and bones. The power in his body was constantly growing. It was just a few otherworldly soldiers, but Lin Yu was almost about to break through to the second level. The power in the otherworldly soldiers' bodies was so vast that Lin Yu couldn't help but be a little surprised. Are these otherworldly soldiers transformed from former powerhouses, or were they created by the path of reincarnation? Lin Yu didn't understand. If these otherworldly soldiers were transformed from powerhouses after they died, then this force was undoubtedly terrifying. This was because every otherworldly soldier here probably had the strength of the 9th step. It was only because they lacked spiritual intelligence that Lin Yu was able to succeed in one strike. Now, the remaining otherworldly soldiers in front seemed to have sensed that someone was attacking them from behind. They turned around ferociously, and their jaws, which were still attached to a bit of skin and flesh, cracked, making one's hair stand on end. Some of the otherworldly soldiers' limbs were broken. The broken weapons, such as broadswords, axes, and dagger axes, were mostly rotten. They carried a rotten aura that seemed to be able to corrode even the void. When they attacked, the entire passage was changing, and the stone walls were eroded. Lin Yu used the ancient word to protect himself. However, the otherworldly soldiers' decaying power was very strange. Even now, Lin Yu used the power of the ancient word. It was still difficult to completely resist it. In the end, Lin Yu didn't hesitate to use the power of the clay jar. Then, he used the stone sword. At this time, the otherworldly soldiers were already rushing toward Lin Yu. They roared and howled, as if they were malicious ghosts from the 9 hells. Lin Yu's face was calm. The stone sword shone. There were still a few otherworldly soldiers left here. However, the leader of them was very powerful. He had almost reached the 3rd level of the 9th step. He wasn't suppressed now. The power that he could unleash was unimaginable. Under the support of the clay jar, the otherworldly soldiers here seemed to show fear. They didn't have spiritual intelligence, as Lin Yu imagined. This fear seemed to be in the origin. "I didn't expect the clay jar to have a suppressive effect on you," Lin Yu said indifferently. One could see that on Lin Yu's stone sword, there seemed to be a yellow, ancient flame that enveloped the sword, although it didn't have any power. In the eyes of the otherworldly soldiers, it was filled with endless threat. Some otherworldly soldiers even began to retreat. However, under the roar of the leader of the otherworldly soldiers, several otherworldly soldiers still stepped forward and pounced on Lin Yu. Chi, one of the otherworldly soldiers, was directly pierced by Lin Yu. Then, Lin Yu directly crushed its head with one hand. The gray substance entered Lin Yu's body through his nose. His spirit was uplifted. It seemed that the gray gas was a rare nourishment for him. If someone saw this scene, those who were familiar with the gray substance would probably be shocked. Who would dare to absorb the gray gas like this? It was no different from courting death. Even the few elders who had fallen previously spent a long time gradually coming into contact with this gray gas. They didn't dare to directly absorb it and turn it into their own nourishment. Now, Lin Yu directly did so. The scene was undoubtedly shocking. Chapter 1479. At this moment, Lin Yu looked more like he had come from the underworld than the Een soldier. As he took a step forward, the Een soldiers were killed one by one. In the end, Lin Yu broke through to the second level. Now, he had put away the stone sword. In his eyes, there was a demonic gray aura. He was like a demon king, cold and bloodthirsty. His mind seemed to have been affected by the excessive intake of the gray aura. Therefore, he was gradually losing his mind. The last Een soldier died in Lin Yu's hands. He was cut into 8 pieces and torn into pieces. Roar! Lin Yu roared. An endless amount of gray gas swirled around his body. It was as if absorbing the gray gas was a form of enjoyment for him. If this was a place where living beings lived, they would have been in a terrible situation, because Lin Yu seemed to be unable to control his actions. However, as time passed, Lin Yu reached the peak of the second level. The gray aura on his body was gradually absorbed into his body. It was completely refined by the millstone. Lin Yu's eyes gradually regained their clarity. "Looks like you're still a little impatient," Lin Yu said. If there were any living beings here, Lin Yu would have already started a massacre and no one would be able to resist him. After all, he was at the 9th step. In the entire Gauchian ancient country, except for a few people who could resist him. Moreover, in the ruins, everyone's cultivation was suppressed. Under the power of the clay jar, Lin Yu could fully use his cultivation. But since we're in the ruins, no one has to worry about it, Lin Yu said. The gray aura couldn't corrode him. However, if he absorbed it too quickly, it would temporarily affect his mind. This wasn't a big problem. After some practice, Lin Yu was sure that his millstone could completely destroy the gray aura and turn it into his own power. Lin Yu continued to move forward. Now, he had turned into the Een soldier slaughterer and was searching everywhere in the ruins. Those who entered the Evernight land would want to avoid the Een soldiers when they saw them. But now, Lin Yu was actively searching. Therefore, he deliberately left a wisp of gray aura to guide the way. 3 days passed. Lin Yu's cultivation was almost finished. This mainly relied on his understanding of the realm and the Tao induction scripture. He could quickly grasp his own realm. However, Lin Yu could still feel that as his strength continued to grow, there seemed to be a bottleneck. It was just that he hadn't encountered it yet. Perhaps if he advanced a few more minor realms, his cultivation would stagnate for a long period of time, and he would need time to stabilize. However, this was a matter for the future. 3 days later, Lin Yu once again encountered a wave of Een soldiers. Unsurprisingly, Lin Yu killed all of them and then devoured the gray gas. His strength's cultivation. He was now at the 3rd level of the 9th step. This kind of speed of advancement, especially at the 9th step, was simply unimaginable. No one dared to believe it. However, Lin Yu wasn't satisfied. He continued to move forward. There was more than one group of Een soldiers in the ruins. As Lin Yu had killed 2 groups, he seemed to have a certain understanding of the patterns of Een soldiers' appearance. The 7th day passed. Lin Yu was getting deeper and deeper into the ruins. He saw 2 groups of Een soldiers. Their destination is here. Lin Yu looked at the location where the gray fog was. Lin Yu was enlightened. At this moment, he could see that the two groups of Yin soldiers seemed to be carrying a coffin. There was a strong smell of blood on it. He didn't know where it came from. However, there was a terrifying aura in the coffin. It's a true spirit, the true spirit of a certain expert. Lin Yu's divine will was very strong. At this moment, through the eyes that had been refined by universe fire and burial ice, he could clearly see the thing in the coffin. This made Lin Yu a little shocked. He had been in the North Star ancient country for a few years and had a lot of understanding of the experts there. However, the true spirit in the coffin clearly didn't come from the North Star ancient country. It didn't belong to any of the experts. This made Lin Yu feel shocked. The aura that the true spirit emitted was definitely at the 9th step. However, for some unknown reason, he fell and was brought here by the Yin soldiers. It seems that these Yin soldiers are just out to look for food. They are looking for nourishment for the thing in the gray fog. Lin Yu seemed to know something and muttered to himself. This might be related to the birth of the thing in the fog. Since Lin Yu already knew, he naturally wouldn't let the thing in the fog get what it wanted. Without much preparation, Lin Yu directly attacked. The yellow aura of the clay pot in his hand raged. This time, he didn't act carelessly. The stone sword exploded with a bright light and directly destroyed a part of it. At the same time, he absorbed the gray aura. The coffin directly exploded. Lin Yu was now at the 3rd level of the 9th step. In his eyes, ordinary Yin soldiers were no longer a big threat. However, it was obvious that the Yin soldiers who could bring back true spirits were very powerful. They weren't weaker than Lin Yu now. They came back to their senses and wanted to attack Lin Yu. However, Lin Yu now used the power of the clay pot. Even if the Yin soldier's strength was similar to Lin Yu's, it couldn't withstand Lin Yu's sword. Boom! The whole place exploded. Not only did Lin Yu kill the powerful Nether soldier with his sword, but he also killed the Nether soldier. Even the coffin was smashed into smithereens. The true spirit inside mixed into the gray aura and was completely absorbed by Lin Yu. The true spirit seemed to retain a trace of consciousness and perceive the aura of its kind. At this time, it actually took the initiative to enter Lin Yu's body and become the nourishment for Lin Yu's divine sense. The true spirit was incomparably pure. It was the purest remnant of an expert after death, without the slightest side effect. Lin Yu's divine sense was also growing at a speed visible to the naked eye. This expert skill is probably not weaker than the 6th level of the 9th step, Lin Yu said. However, Lin Yu didn't absorb the expert's origin completely. He kept the core and let it dissipate in the ruins, leaving behind the hope of reincarnation. One could see that the person bowed deeply to Lin Yu and then disappeared into the void. Lin Yu didn't know if this person had really dissipated or gone to reincarnate. Lin Yu didn't know much about this either. Lin Yu naturally didn't let go of the remaining group of Yin soldiers. He directly killed them as soon as he attacked. The scene fell into silence. After refining the true spirit and the gray aura, Lin Yu's realm improved again. He wasn't satisfied. Now he had a rough idea of the Yin soldiers' purpose. They were to provide nourishment for the thing in the gray fog. Since that was the case, he could just wait here for the Nether soldiers to arrive and kill them when they arrived. Although the Nether soldiers could have entered the gray fog from all directions, they were not able to escape. But now Lin Yu only needed to station in one direction and the harvest would be great. As time passed, Lin Yu encountered the 3rd group of Yin soldiers on the 3rd day. He didn't hold back at all and directly killed all the Yin soldiers. Chapter 1480. His realm was because there was a Go soldier with the strength of the 4th level among the Go soldiers. Lin Yu's realm, after some accumulation, broke through again and reached the 4th level. Now, there was a faint gray aura lingering around his body. It seemed that it was about to be assimilated. Next, Lin Yu did not waste any time. He quickly settled his realm and then got rid of the gray aura in his body and completely refined it. In the next month, Lin Yu killed countless ghost soldiers. This was tantamount to snatching food from the tiger's mouth. Finally, when Lin Yu killed the last group of ghost soldiers, the thing in the depths of the gray fog seemed to have sensed Lin Yu's existence. At this moment, it roared. It seemed to be threatening Lin Yu. However, for the current Lin Yu, as long as the main body of that thing did not appear, it would not pose the slightest threat to him. This is just collecting some interest. When the time comes, I will settle it personally. Lin Yu said indifferently. In the end, after killing 20 groups of ghost soldiers, his strength broke through to the 5th step. Because of Lin Yu's existence, the thing in the depths of the gray fog seemed to be deliberately controlling the ghost soldiers to not appear in the world. However, now that Lin Yu had absorbed and refined so much gray aura, he had a deep sense of the existence of the ghost soldiers. Although it was not in Lin Yu's position, it still could not escape Lin Yu's means. Next, he killed a few more groups of ghost soldiers. In the end, the thing in the depths of the gray fog did not let the ghost soldiers appear. Lin Yu had been stationed here for a month. At this moment, he looked at the gray fog and sneered. You could be afraid too? He now knew that the number of ghost soldiers was not unknown, but limited. After Lin Yu's continuous killing, even the thing in the gray fog could not withstand it. If he continued to let Lin Yu kill, in the end, he might not have any ghost soldiers to control and go to the world to find nourishment. Lin Yu saw the fear in the depths of the gray fog. Now that there were no more Een soldiers to kill, he had no intention of staying here any longer. He was about to get up and leave. It was likely that the thing in the depths of the fog had suffered a great loss in the past few months. Now that so many Een soldiers have been killed, the time of his emergence would undoubtedly be delayed for a long time. He was unwilling to accept this. He wanted to attack Lin Yu, who was about to leave. Oomph. Lin Yu snorted coldly. With a lift of his hand, he directly absorbed that thing's technique. He did not forget to mock it and said, "Many thanks." After that, the thing in the depths of the gray fog fell silent. Lin Yu also left the ruins. At this moment, he had arrived on the land of Evernight and was gazing at the desolate land. There was another reason for him to leave this place, and that was because he seemed to have reached a bottleneck. Although the Tao guiding scripture could eliminate the hidden dangers of bottlenecks and breakthroughs, it was still not enough. However, Lin Yu's breakthrough speed was simply too fast. Since ancient times, there had never been an existence with a breakthrough speed like Lin Yu's. Even the Tao induction scripture could not eliminate this hidden danger. He needed some time to settle down. When the time comes, I might be able to enter the depths of the gray fog and absorb that thing. Lin Yu's eyes shone brightly. He wanted to use that thing to break through the final step, which was the 10th step. He wanted to fuse with his own Tao fruit and truly ascend to that supreme realm. Lin Yu took out the bronze lamp given by the Divine Master. The inextinguishable flame within it pointed the way. Hence, it saved Lin Yu a lot of effort. Along the way, Lin Yu was also constantly comprehending blazing heaven. He had integrated it into his own cultivation. It turns out that blazing heaven is just as Liu Yu said. It can no longer be considered a spell. It is a type of Tao, the Tao of imperial arts. Lin Yu said slowly along the way. Blazing heaven was filled with mysteries. It could fuse all the spells one had mastered into one and completely integrate with one's own body. Hence, when the Divine Master attacked earlier, it could be seen that even without using any spells or divine abilities, his attacks were already beyond divine abilities and spells. It was filled with endless mysteries. Furthermore, according to Liu Yu, the Divine Court had more than one type of divine ability that was comparable to blazing heaven. Although this world does not have a deep understanding of the Tao, it has already reached the pinnacle of divine abilities and spells. Lin Yu muttered to himself. It just so happened that it complemented his current state. Lin Yu spent a month walking out of the land of eternal night. During this month, he had completely grasped blazing heaven. Now, he was able to completely control his great void 8 divisions to an unprecedented degree. It was as if he could fuse his strongest techniques with a raise of his hand and turn them into even more terrifying techniques. This was the mystery of blazing heaven. He arrived at the territory of the North Star ancient nation and did not stop for long. He immediately set off on his way back. On the way, he stepped onto many ancient realm entrances of the Divine Court. In just a few days, he returned to the Fu-Ho country. He met Lu Yu and the others. The North Star ancient nation is about to make a big move. The pavilion lord of the divine, secret pavilion said. On the way back, Lin Yu also understood some things. At this moment, he said, "Is it starting with the sage king election of the Bright Moon Nunnery?" "That's right." The pavilion lord of the divine, secret pavilion said. Shun was also present. After the divine master returned to the North Star ancient nation, he left. Lu Yu also followed the divine master. He took the reincarnation talisman and disappeared without a trace. It seemed that he was going to accomplish something big. Since that's the case, let's go to the Bright Moon Nunnery. It's a good chance to fulfill my promise. Lin Yu said. This time, the old emperor of the North Star ancient nation has awakened with the current 7th prince. It seems that he is determined to get the sage king seat of the Bright Moon Nunnery. Sheng looked at Lin Yu and said, "It doesn't matter." Lin Yu said, "Back then, the old emperor fought with the divine master. At that time, he was already at the 5th level of the 9th step. Now, I'm afraid." Sheng was worried. "It's nothing to worry about," Lin Yu said calmly. Sheng could no longer see through Lin Yu's cultivation. However, he did not expect Lin Yu to break through to the 5th level of the 9th step in just a few months. Lin Yu wasn't boasting. Instead, he really didn't care about the imperial emeritus of the North Star ancient country anymore. Back then, when the old emperor was still on the throne, he gathered countless experts to attack the divine court. However, in the end, the acting divine master suppressed everything. This was also the reason why the old emperor abdicated. The pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion obviously knew many secrets. At this moment, he said, now that the old emperor has reappeared, his strength should have broken through again. The pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion reminded Lin Yu not to be careless. In fact, he should have left with the divine master. However, he wanted to go to the Bright Moon Nunnery to meet an old friend. Hence, the divine master gave him a mission. He wanted to organize the prince of the North Star ancient nation to marry the holy maiden of the Bright Moon Nunnery. The origin of the Bright Moon Nunnery was very mysterious. The divine court already knew that the Bright Moon Nunnery came from the other side of the land of Evernight. However, they did not know what their purpose was. Now, the entire North Star ancient nation was about to undergo a huge change. It was related to the other side of the land of Evernight. The divine court would not allow the North Star ancient nation to marry the Bright Moon Nunnery. This was a huge threat to the divine court. I can take care of the old emperor, Lin Yu said. Since the divine court wanted to stop this marriage, and he had promised Lu Ruyin and Yu Linglong, it was time for him to pay a visit to the Bright Moon Nunnery. The pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion looked at Lin Yu meaningfully. He did not say anything else. In the next 3 days, Lin Yu refined a 9th level pill. It allowed the pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion to recover to his peak. He became a 9th step expert again and looked much younger. At the same time, with the support of Lin Yu's pill, Sheng also broke through to the 8th step. Chapter 1481. After making all the necessary preparations, Lin Yu and the others were ready to set off immediately. When Sheng walked out of the room, he had already taken off his black robe and was wearing a black dress. His black hair was like a waterfall, and he had bright eyes and white teeth. He looked like a fairy who had bloomed in this mortal world. The pavilion lord of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion was surprised. After all this time, he still did not know that Sheng was a girl. Lin Yu was not too surprised by Sheng's true appearance, because he already knew Sheng's true gender when he was in the ruins. "Sheng, what are you doing?" The pavilion lord of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion asked with a puzzled smile. Sheng saw that Lin Yu's expression did not change at all and could not help but feel a little disappointed. However, she quickly replied, "I have a deep connection with Mingyuan Nunnery. Now that I'm going there, I naturally have to show my true appearance." "I see." The pavilion lord of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion nodded and said, "In that case, let's set off." They directly stepped into the space gate. After 7 days, the 3 of them arrived at the area where Mingyuan Nunnery was located. They could see that there were powerful cultivators everywhere in the city closest to Mingyuan Nunnery. It was unknown how many forces had come here because of the Holy King election held by Mingyuan Nunnery. It was destined to be a grand event. However, they still did not know that the retired emperor of the ancient kingdom of Gaochen had come out and brought the most talented seventh prince to Mingyuan Nunnery. He was determined to get the saintess of Mingyuan Nunnery. The pavilion lord of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion shook his head and said, "It seems that no one can stay here anymore." Sheng did not seem to be happy along the way. He seemed to have something on his mind. The pavilion lord and Lin Yu did not say much about this. This was a matter between Sheng and Mingyuan Nunnery. It was not their place to say anything. "Let's go to Mingyuan Nunnery," Sheng said. "There will be a place to receive VIPs." Sheng led the way. They soon arrived at the area where Mingyuan Nunnery was located. The entire Mingyuan Nunnery was filled with Buddhist buildings. There were many temples. It was surrounded by mountains and rivers. Celestial mist curled up in spirals. There was a huge lion guarding the gate. One could vaguely hear the sound of Buddhist chanting, ethereal and ethereal. There was a huge difference between this place and the Mingyuan Nunnery, where the four people practiced the dual cultivation method. If one did not know that this was the Mingyuan Nunnery, it was very likely that one would suspect that one had arrived at a Buddhist holy land. "Who are you?" When the two disciples guarding the gate saw Lin Yu and the others, they immediately blocked their way. "Go and report that Sheng requests an audience." Sheng stepped forward and slowly said, "Rise, third saintess." The two disciples murmured. Then they came back to their senses and immediately knelt on the ground, saying, "We didn't know that the third saintess was coming. Please forgive us. We will go and report immediately." "Get up," Sheng said. After coming here, Sheng had maintained his indifference and did not speak as much as when he was with Lu Yu. Soon, a white-clothed woman arrived. She wore a simple hairpin on her head and had a graceful hairpin. Although her clothes were simple and unadorned, they were unable to conceal her beautiful figure and graceful figure. "Third saintess, the Holy Master wants you to go to the main hall," the person said. "Make arrangements for my two friends," Sheng said to the middle-aged woman before leaving. After saying that, he went straight to the main hall. Along the way, he did not mention his relationship with the Mingyuan Nunnery. It was only now that Lin Yu and the other person knew that Sheng was the third saintess of the Mingyuan Nunnery. This identity would undoubtedly shock the entire Gaochen ancient nation. Everyone knew that the Mingyuan Nunnery had three saintesses who had practiced the cultivation method of the Mingyuan Nunnery to the extreme. They could become unprecedented and would not be surpassed in the future. However, Lu Rushi was the only one in the selection this time. "The two of you, please follow me." The two disciples led Lin Yu and the pavilion master of the Divine Secret Pavilion into the Mingyuan Nunnery. Due to Sheng's special instructions, Lin Yu and the others came to the place with the most abundant vitality in the Mingyuan Nunnery. This place was surrounded by mountains and rivers. It could be said that the scenery was beautiful, like a fairyland. "When the meeting begins, I will inform the two of you." After saying that, the two disciples took their leave. "Thank you," the pavilion master of the Divine Secret Pavilion said. After that, the two of them stayed there for 3 days. Other than the food and fruits that the disciples brought over, Sheng was nowhere to be seen. After leaving the last time, he did not appear again. Lin Yu and the pavilion master of the Divine Secret Pavilion were proficient in deduction. They knew that Sheng was not in any danger. 7 days passed. The meeting was about to begin. The entire Mingyuan Nunnery was bustling with people. Even though the Mingyuan Nunnery had only invited the major forces of the Gaochen ancient nation and the most outstanding geniuses of the current generation, there were still more than 10,000 people. If not for the fact that the Mingyuan Nunnery occupied a vast area, it might not be able to accommodate so many people. There was a cloud platform between the three mountains. Every table was filled with fine wine, spirit fruits, and so on. Some people had already taken their seats. There were sounds of discussion, filled with yearning for the saintess of the Mingyuan Nunnery, Lu Rushi. "In your dreams," someone said to the young man beside him, "Hero, I think you're just courting death, someone retorted. Most of the people who came here were the top geniuses of the major forces. They were followed by many experts, all of whom exuded an extraordinary aura. The arrival of Lin Yu and the pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion seemed a little out of place. This was because the two of them were dressed casually. Many people could not tell the cultivation levels of Lin Yu and the pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion due to their low cultivation levels. Therefore, they did not think that they were very strong. Is the sage ruler election meeting of the Mingyuan nunnery a place where any Tom, Dick, or Harry can come? Someone looked at Lin Yu and could not help but mock him. However, at this moment, someone recognized the identity of the pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion. There was no trace of respect in their eyes. This was a grudge between the older generation of experts. An old man at the 8th step said mockingly, "Isn't this the crippled pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion? What wind blew you here? Is this your boy's servant? Why aren't you wearing good clothes?" Another old man continued to mock him. They had old grudges with the pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion. Now that they met, it was natural for them to mock him. One of them seemed to be giving an order. The pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion looked at an old man who was close to decaying. He was currently resting with his eyes closed, ignoring the noise outside. The pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion did not answer them. Instead, he asked directly, "Is this old monster Huang's order? Why do you have to call Senior Huang Cheng an old man? Why don't you take a look at your own cultivation level?" That person questioned. "Then I know," the pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion said. He did not care at all. He immediately attacked and sent the 2 8-step cultivators who had spoken earlier flying off the cloud platform. Their bodies shattered and they were crippled. One had to know that 8-step experts were rare in the entire North Star ancient nation. Now, 2 of them were crippled in a single exchange. He's the pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion. Has he recovered his strength? Someone said in shock. No wonder he didn't show any fear even after knowing that Huang Cheng was here. Someone revealed a look of realization. However, the 2 8-step cultivators were miserable. They had been crippled. One had to know that they were both old men in large factions. The pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion is still so powerful, someone said with a sigh. Looks like there'll be a good show to watch before the meeting begins, someone said. Chapter 1482. Their gazes all shifted to the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion. Some of them looked as if they were watching a show. The old man called Huang Cheng was clearly a 9-step expert. When he saw the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion walking towards him, he only glanced at him indifferently before closing his eyes again. "Is this your idea?" the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion asked. "Do we still need to play such tricks at our level?" Huang Cheng said slowly without opening his eyes. "I hope so." There was no great battle. The two exchanged a few words before the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion and Lin Yu found a place to sit down. An hour later, almost all of the invited guests had arrived. The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion did not notice the arrival of the retired emperor. At that moment, he was looking at the depths of the Mingyuan nunnery with a deep and frustrated expression. He said, "I have something to do, so I will take my leave first." Lin Yu nodded. He knew that the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion and the holy master of the Mingyuan nunnery had an indescribable relationship. Perhaps it was time for him to go over and have a chat. After the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion left, Huang Cheng also disappeared from his seat at some point. Lin Yu took a sip of tea. He could not help but smile as he said, "It seems that the pavilion master's generation is also surging with storms." With the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion making a move, no one dared to cause trouble for Lin Yu. Some people even took the initiative to chat with Lin Yu, wanting to get closer to the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion. In their opinion, Lin Yu was just a servant of the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion. However, since the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion had brought him here, he should be very favored by the pavilion master. However, Lin Yu was not interested in these people's conversations. At that moment, he only sipped his tea. Some people were rebuffed and couldn't help but curse in their hearts. He's just a lowly boy. We want to talk to him because we gave him face, but now he's actually acting like this. His life is really cheap, bah. However, just as he was cursing Lin Yu, a huge palm slapped him with a huge palm. A huge handprint slapped him away, breaking many of his bones. This time, the second patriarch of the Su family had also come. He had already acknowledged Lin Yu as his master. However, as soon as he arrived, he heard others insulting his master. His attack was already considered very light. However, he was still able to make a young genius, whose strength wasn't considered top-notch, lose half his life. Fu family, take care of your family's things, the Su family's second grandmaster said directly. In the face of the Su family's second ancestor's attack, for no reason, the Fu family did not dare to say anything. In the entire North Star ancient nation, only the imperial family and a few other powers could suppress the Su family. Just as everyone was wondering why the Su clan's second forefather had made a move, the Su clan's second forefather actually knelt down in front of Lin Yu. The second son of the Su family greets the master. Lin Yu nodded faintly and said, "Go." Yes. The Su clan's second forefather took his leave with the Su family's prodigies. The scene fell into silence. Who was the Su clan's second forefather? He was one of the strongest people in the entire North Star ancient nation. At this moment, he actually acknowledged the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion as his master. What kind of incomprehensible thing was this? Some people even stood rooted to the ground in disbelief. Those who were still complaining about Lin Yu immediately shut their mouths and quickly left the place. The Fu family's prodigy was the best outcome. They didn't want to be crippled before the grand event even started. An hour passed. At this moment, roar. A dragon's roar resounded through the clouds. An illusory image of a true dragon appeared in the sky. There were two people on the dragon's back. One of them had white hair and was filled with anger. The other was gentle and elegant, young and handsome. Dressed in the imperial family's attire, he attracted everyone's attention. Some people couldn't even withstand the dragon's pressure and directly knelt on the ground. Everyone's expression changed drastically. For a moment, they didn't know what was going on. Only Lin Yu sat calmly in his seat, still minding his own business and drinking tea. It was as if he didn't see such a terrifying pressure. He was still calm and indifferent. It's the old emperor of the North Star, ancient nation. A famous person recognized the Taoist in front of him and was shocked. It was rumored that the old emperor had already passed away 1,000 years ago. They didn't expect to meet him at the grand event of the Bright Moon Nunnery. Greetings, old emperor. Greetings, old emperor. Many people in the crowd knelt down. Even if there were some powerful forces that could make the North Star ancient nation pay attention to them, the old emperor would only be able to suppress them. In the North Star ancient nation, the old emperor alone was enough to suppress everything. Everyone in the crowd was respectful. Only Lin Yu sat there calmly. It was as if he didn't feel the pressure. The seventh prince of the North Star ancient nation was in the crowd. When he saw Lin Yu, he couldn't help but frown. The old emperor naturally saw Lin Yu as well. However, he was only slightly suspicious. He rode on the golden dragon and landed on the high platform. The old emperor didn't treat him as an outsider. He stood with the people of the Bright Moon Nunnery. At this moment, the Saint Master of the Bright Moon Nunnery also arrived. Greetings, old emperor. The saintess of the Bright Moon Nunnery was a beautiful middle-aged woman. She was dressed luxuriously. "You may rise," the old emperor said slowly. He had an imposing aura. At this moment, the entire place was silent. Lu Rushi also arrived. She wore a veil to cover her face. She walked gracefully. Behind her were Yu Linglong and Sheng, who had returned to the Bright Moon Nunnery. Everyone's gaze was fixed on the three saintesses. They couldn't take their eyes off them. It was as if the three saintesses had become the center of the world. The seventh prince turned his head and nodded slightly at Lu Rushi and the other two with an elegant smile. Lu Rushi and the other two only glanced at him. They didn't respond. Everyone in the Bright Moon Nunnery knew that the North Star Imperial family was here for the three of them. However, the Saint Master of the Bright Moon Nunnery smiled. "Let's start the banquet first," the Saint Master said with a smile. She seemed to be asking for the old emperor's opinion. "I don't think it's necessary," the old emperor's imposing voice sounded. "The seventh prince of the imperial family is here to ask for the Mingyuan nunnery's hand in marriage. I don't want the imperial concubine of the imperial family to show her face too much." When the old emperor said that, the entire place fell silent. The change happened too quickly. No one expected that the old emperor of the North Star ancient nation, who was already at the fifth layer of the ninth step, would come personally for the Bright Moon Nunnery's banquet. Although many people had objections, they didn't dare to voice them out. Lu Rushi and the other two also saw Lin Yu in the crowd. They couldn't help but frown. Yu Linglong's eyes seemed to want Lin Yu to leave as soon as possible. If the old emperor knew about them, Lin Yu's life would be in danger. Lin Yu naturally saw the meaning in Yu Linglong's eyes. However, he remained calm. Chapter 1483. The seventh prince, who had been paying attention to the three saintesses, saw the exchange between the two of them. He couldn't help but look at Lin Yu coldly. To him, the three saintesses had already been decided by him. In the future, they could only be his concubines. How could they exchange glances with others? As he thought about it, his eyes were filled with killing intent. Lin Yu looked on calmly. He had no intention of making a move yet. "This time, I've asked the seventh prince of the imperial family to propose marriage to the three saintesses," the retired emperor said calmly. It was as if these words were natural coming out of his mouth. The moment he said those words, everyone present was shocked. He wanted to obtain three saintesses at the same time. Everyone knew that the three saintesses of this generation had cultivated Mingyuan nunnery's cultivation technique to an unprecedented level. There was a rumor that the person who obtained three saintesses at the same time could reach the 10th step. Moreover, the seventh prince was one of the strongest experts of this generation in the entire Gaochen ancient nation. He was already at the 8th step. This kind of cultivation talent was rarely seen in the entire history of the Gaochen ancient nation. The imperial family of the Gaochen ancient nation was very bold. The retired emperor had personally come out of seclusion to propose marriage. "I don't think this is appropriate," Yu Linglong said. "Linglong, you don't have the right to speak here," the holy master of Mingyuan nunnery scolded. Yu Linglong didn't say anything in the face of the holy master's pressure. She returned to her original position. However, her expression was still filled with dissatisfaction. "Since the retired emperor has said so, why don't we choose a date to form an alliance with the imperial family? We can slowly discuss the following matters later," the holy master said. Lu Rushi and the other two's expressions changed when they heard the holy master's words. "I don't agree," Sheng stood up and said resolutely. "Don't mess around," the holy master said. One could see that as Sheng struggled, chains of Taoist laws appeared on his body. It turned out that the three saintesses had been imprisoned for the past few days. They couldn't break free. It was as if they were forcing the three saintesses to marry the seventh prince regardless of whether they agreed or not. "It seems that the three holy maidens have some objections," the retired emperor said. "The rule of the Mingyuan nunnery has always been to marry the most outstanding genius. There is nothing wrong with that," the sacred leader said with a smile. "That's true. Once we're in the palace, you'll have to train my grandson well," the retired emperor said. "Yes, I will." The seventh prince wore a smile on his face as he looked at the three gorgeous figures. His eyes could not help but burn with passion. Even though the seventh prince had been cultivating for a long time, he couldn't help but have a lustful look in his eyes when he was faced with such beautiful women. Furthermore, they were cultivating a dual cultivation technique. The retired emperor thought highly of the seventh prince and believed that he could surpass him in the future. Right now, he had already decided that the seventh prince would be the future successor of the Gaochen ancient kingdom. To everyone's disappointment, he still knelt on the ground. "Congratulations, seventh prince. Who allowed you to make such a decision?" Suddenly, petals began to dance in the sky. The entire place was shrouded in a layer of beauty. An old woman with a walking stick appeared. Her cultivation of the ninth step was fully revealed. Have you forgotten the rules of the Mingyuan nunnery? Huang Cheng, the pavilion master of the heavenly secret pavilion, stood beside the old woman. They arrived at the high platform. Master, the sacred leader's expression turned grave when she saw the old woman. There was a major problem with the old woman's body. That was why she passed the position of the sacred leader to her 1,000 years ago. She should be in seclusion now. However, it seemed that her old injuries had already healed. Moreover, she had improved further and was now at the second layer of the ninth step. Old sacred leader. The retired emperor greeted the old woman politely when he saw her. Greetings, retired emperor. The old woman bowed. However, after they met, the old woman's expression turned ugly. The old woman's expression turned unsightly. She immediately scolded the sacred leader. Step aside for now. He didn't give the sacred leader any face. If the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion had not brought him the sacred medicine to treat his injuries, and he had not recovered, it was likely that he would not have been able to control the development of the situation. The sacred leader of the Mingyuan nunnery had never married anyone. Even if the seventh prince is terrifyingly talented, he doesn't have the aptitude of the 10th step. Forgive me for being blunt, but he's not qualified, the old woman said. She didn't give the retired emperor any face. Even though the old woman's cultivation was only at the second layer of the ninth step, they were not afraid of any forces in the North Star ancient nation. Even if the imperial family came, the old woman still didn't show any fear. I don't know what benefits the sacred leader has received from the imperial family. The rules of the Mingyuan nunnery cannot be broken. Since the seventh prince wants to marry the 3 sacred leaders, he should show his true strength. The old woman's words directly dispelled the retired emperor's intention of marrying the 3 sacred leaders. Old sacred leader, what do you mean? The retired emperor frowned slightly. Nothing. I hope the imperial family can understand. The rules of the Mingyuan nunnery have been passed down since ancient times. They cannot be broken, the old woman said. She didn't side with anyone and spoke directly. If you want to marry the 3 sacred leaders, you must display the aptitude of the 10th step. Otherwise, forgive us for not giving the imperial family any face. The old woman was very domineering. After arriving, she directly dispelled the retired emperor's intention of marrying the 3 sacred leaders. The retired emperor's expression changed slightly. However, he soon laughed loudly and said, "Are you saying that my grandson is qualified to marry the 3 sacred leaders just because he's defeated everyone here?" The old woman's body was withstanding a great amount of pressure. She was inwardly shocked by the retired emperor. After not seeing him for a long time, his cultivation had actually improved again. He was most likely close to the 6th step now. The old woman found it difficult to withstand the terrifying pressure. The dragon chi beneath the Mingyuan nunnery was surging. The retired emperor was threatening her and pressuring her. However, there was nothing she could do now. The entire place fell into silence. Under the retired emperor's supreme pressure, even if there were opponents who could rival the 7th prince, they wouldn't dare to step forward. Even if they could defeat the 7th prince, they weren't confident that their ancestors could withstand the retired emperor's fury. It was possible that a simple mistake could lead to the destruction of his entire force. They didn't want to become the sinners of their faction. It's fine. At this moment, the pavilion master of the divination pavilion transmitted his voice to the old woman. There was a smile at the corner of his mouth, as if he was telling the old woman to be at ease and not fear the retired emperor's pressure. This junior dares to ask the old holy lord to preside. The 7th prince spoke directly. He was forcing the old woman to agree. The old woman looked at the 3 sacred leaders with her eyes closed and said, "If you really want to marry the 3 sacred leaders, you must withstand the power from the other side of the Evernight continent." This wasn't a threat, but a statement of fact. Since this junior is already here, there's nothing to worry about, the 7th prince said indifferently. Chapter 1484. Since you already have such thoughts, I won't say anything more. However, The rules of our Mingwen nunnery cannot be broken. If you can challenge all the geniuses in the Gauchian ancient kingdom, I have nothing more to say, the old woman said slowly. In fact, the dragon aura of the earth beneath the Mingwen nunnery was already controlled by the retired emperor. If the old woman continued to be stubborn, the entire Mingwen nunnery might be destroyed by him. Helpless, he had no choice but to agree. May I ask who is willing to fight me? The seventh prince arrived at the center of the square and looked at the crowd calmly. A formless suppressive force was formed. The seventh prince had already reached the 8th step. In the entire Gauchian ancient kingdom, even the experts of the older generation would not be able to match him. At this stage, the number of people who could match him could be counted with one's fingers. Even if there were only a few people, none of the retired emperor's side dared to step forward. Don't worry. Since I've agreed to the Mingwen nunnery's request, I won't bully you with my strength, the seventh prince said slowly. He had a scholarly smile on his face that made people feel as if they were bathing in the spring breeze. The square was still silent. No one dared to step forward. Imperial grandfather. The seventh prince looked at the retired emperor. The seventh prince had an invincible heart. Therefore, he was not afraid at all, even if he was facing some of the geniuses who were once as famous as him. There's no need to restrain yourselves. If my imperial grandson is defeated, I won't have any complaints. I won't affect your forces in any way, the retired emperor said. He looked at his imperial grandson, full of confidence. The seventh prince had already accepted the Gauchian ancient kingdom's test and grasped the dragon aura of the earth. Now, even the experts of the older generation would not be his match. That was why the retired emperor was so fearless. If the retired emperor changed his mind in the end, it would be a slap to the imperial family's face. The imperial family would lose their prestige in the Gauchian ancient kingdom. Since the retired emperor has said so, I'm willing to exchange a few blows with the seventh prince. This time, a young man with sword-like eyebrows and bright eyes walked out. He wore a red robe and had a bloodthirsty aura. The blood shadow sex Zhu Yun, an existence who attains his Tao through killing, has already reached the 8th step. Someone recognized the young man's identity and revealed a shocked expression. He, the seventh prince, and the others were once known as the 10 great prodigies of the Gauchian ancient kingdom. Although some people were surprised, they weren't surprised by Zhu Yun's actions. After all, the temptation of the 3 saintesses of the Mingwen nunnery was too great, especially talents like them who were rarely seen in their generation. No one could resist the temptation of breaking through to the 10th step, especially after the retired emperor had said so. There were already a few people who were ready to make a move. The seventh prince cupped his hands and said, "Brother Jiyun, please. I've heard a lot about you. Now that I've met you in person, your strength is indeed astonishing." The seventh prince had the intention of praising him. There was no trace of fear on his face. He was still very indifferent. Zhu Yun also cupped his hands and looked at the seventh prince with a cold expression. His scarlet eyes were filled with bloodlust. The meeting held by the Mingwen nunnery is only for exchanging pointers. Please don't kill anyone. It's not good for anyone, the old woman said. There weren't any restrictions during the entire battle. The two of them cupped their hands and greeted the old woman. "Brother Zhu Yun, are you ready?" The seventh prince said indifferently. There was a smile on his face from the beginning to the end. At this moment, Zhu Yun was frowning deeply. He seemed to sense a killing intent that was even more intense than his own from the seventh prince's body. However, it was very well hidden and almost impossible to detect. Only someone like him, who attained his Tao through killing, could faintly sense it from the seventh prince's body. "Make your move," Zhu Yun said. Although he was vaguely worried, the temptation of the 3 saintesses was too great. No matter what, he could only take a gamble. If he really won, the Gauchian ancient kingdom's 10th step expert, who could only be born once every few generations, would appear in the Blood Shadow sect. A blood-red long saber appeared in Zhu Yun's hand. It was surrounded by a strong, killing intent. It seems like Brother Zhu Yun has cultivated the killing intent to the extreme. Even I can only look at it from afar, the seventh prince said with a smile. The seventh prince smiled and said faintly, if that's the case, I can only use my full strength. As the seventh prince flicked his finger, the roar of a dragon suddenly appeared on the ground. It was extremely majestic. Zhu Yun, who was originally charging towards the seventh prince, immediately retreated. Earth Dragon, Qi. I didn't expect you to have already inherited it when you're only a prince. Zhu Yun's face changed drastically. Several golden dragons appeared on the ground. They were hundreds of feet long and covered in dense scales. The golden light was so dazzling that it was difficult to open one's eyes. Lin Yu stood at the side. He wasn't in a hurry. Instead, he calmly looked at the Earth Dragon Qi. Is this another power of this world? Lin Yu thought to himself. He had never seen such a power before. It seemed to originate from the ground. This power was extremely mysterious. Even Lin Yu couldn't comprehend all of its mysteries. The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion had already arrived beside Lin Yu. He looked at the seventh prince with a serious expression and said, Earth Dragon Qi, the draconic Qi of the Great Earth. Legend has it that it was formed by the blood of an emperor of this world after he fought against a great demon. The draconic Qi of the Great Earth is something that is formed from the blood of an emperor of this world. It contains supreme power. The North Star Ancient Country is able to use this power to rule over a region. This is also one of the reasons why the North Star Ancient Country is still standing. The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion explained to Lin Yu. Lin Yu nodded. If this was only the blood essence of the emperor of this world, it would already be so powerful. How powerful was the emperor of that time? It was already unimaginable. Also, what kind of great demon was able to injure a powerful monarch? Lin Yu was slightly shocked. He was now interested in this power. Therefore, he looked at the battlefield. However, Zhu Yun was obviously no match for the seventh prince. Now it was trapped by the true dragon formed by the Earth Dragon energy. It couldn't even break free, let alone get close to the seventh prince. Puff! Zhu Yun was sent flying by the golden dragon. The sharp dragon claws tore his arm apart, causing blood to spurt out. Wait! Seeing that the true dragon was about to attack him, Zhu Yun was terrified. He had killed countless people. Now that death was approaching, he finally showed fear. However, the seventh prince didn't seem to hear him. He stood in the sky like the only king in the world. He didn't show any emotion. He controlled the true dragon and tore Zhu Yun apart in front of everyone's shocked gazes. Zhu Yun's body shattered into pieces and was devoured by the true dragon, turning into powder. Fresh blood splattered on the ground. It was still warm. It looked ferocious and sad. Seventh Prince, retired Emperor, what is this? The late-stage, eighth-step expert of the Blood Shadow sect wanted to step forward. However, when he saw the retired Emperor's cold gaze, he could only step back. His eyes were filled with sadness. Zhu Yun had indeed lost. However, he was clearly prepared to admit defeat. However, the seventh prince didn't even give Zhu Yun a chance to finish speaking. He directly killed him. I'm sorry. I just came into contact with the Earth Dragon Qi. I'm still not familiar with controlling it. That's why Brother Zhu Yun of the Blood Shadow sect died. The seventh prince's face was filled with regret. However, anyone with a discerning eye knew that the seventh prince did it on purpose. Chapter 1485. Mistakes are inevitable in a fight, the retired emperor said faintly. He didn't blame the seventh prince. He seemed very strong. Old Holy Master, please forgive me. The seventh prince turned around and cupped his hands at the old woman. There's no need. Fellow cultivator from the Blood Shadow sect, I'm sorry. I didn't pay attention. The old woman apologized to the Blood Shadow sect's expert. The Blood Shadow sect's old man's eyes were bloodshot. He was unwilling. Zhu Yun was the most outstanding genius in the Blood Shadow sect since its establishment. Now that he had died in Mingwen nunnery, it was undoubtedly a pity. If given enough time, Zhu Yun might have been able to reach the ninth step. At that time, he would definitely inherit the Blood Shadow Sect's legacy and bring the Blood Shadow Sect to a higher level. But now, everything had turned into a bubble. "It's fine," the Blood Shadow Sect's expert said through gritted teeth. Even though he was the strongest expert in the Blood Shadow Sect, he was still like an ant before the retired emperor. Even though he was dissatisfied, he didn't dare to show it. "I'll compensate the Blood Shadow Sect," the retired emperor said slowly. "There's no need. It's my Qilin son who's inferior," the Blood Shadow Sect's ancestor said with a sigh. After saying that, he led the Blood Shadow Sect's people and left quietly. Everyone sighed. Originally, the Blood Shadow Sect's strength was undeniable after producing such a peerless genius. But now, everything was like a bubble. "The Blood Shadow Sect's ancestor is righteous." The seventh prince bowed. However, in the eyes of everyone present, his actions this time around were undoubtedly hypocritical, causing them to feel contempt for him. "Continue," the retired emperor said. His tone was impatient. "I wonder which fellow cultivator would like to spar with me." The seventh prince cupped his hands and said. He didn't smile, as if he was still sad that he had accidentally killed Zhu Yun. Sky Ascension Pavilion, Su Shun. A hero stepped forward. He was dressed in a green Taoist robe, with a Taiji 8 trigrams diagram embroidered on his chest. His eyes were filled with pity and anger. Many people knew that he had a close relationship with Zhu Yun. Now that he had stepped forward, it was clear that he wanted to seek justice for Zhu Yun. Fellow Taoist Su Shun. The seventh prince was very polite and bowed his head in accordance with Taoist etiquette. Su Shun returned the greeting. Today, Su Shun didn't know what was good for him and asked the seventh prince for advice. Su Shun said. With a wave of his hand, a Taiji 8 trigrams diagram appeared on the ground. As it appeared, it began to expand infinitely until it eventually enveloped the entire battlefield. He sealed the dragon Qi underground, wanting to cut off one of the seventh prince's arms. However, it was clear that he had underestimated the seventh prince and the earth dragon Qi. Boom! The earth rumbled and shook. The Taiji 8 trigrams diagram only sealed the earth dragon Qi for a moment before it was broken. Su Shun immediately spat out a mouthful of blood, and his figure could not help but retreat. However, it was clear that Su Shun, as one of the 10 great geniuses of the North Star Ancient Kingdom, had plenty of battle experience. The moment he retreated, he waved his big sleeve, and countless flying swords appeared, forming some kind of profound sword array. While it was used to defend, there was still a large portion that attacked the seventh prince. This was undoubtedly a method of fighting that would cause both sides to suffer. Su Shun was clearly asking for an explanation for Zhu Yun. Facing Su Shun's reckless attack, the seventh prince's eyes revealed a trace of coldness. He did not hold back in the slightest, and his body shone. Mysterious runes appeared on his clothes, carrying with them the will of immortality. The Emperor's runes unique to the North Star Imperial family. "I didn't expect the seventh prince to have even grasped this," someone exclaimed. The moment the flying swords approached the seventh prince, they exploded inch by inch. At the same time, the true dragons charged towards Su Shun. The ancestor of the sky, rising pavilion, was shocked. At this moment, he no longer cared about his face and directly went to save Su Shun. However, the retired emperor had already completely controlled this place. Even though the ancestor of the sky, rising pavilion, was currently at the peak of the 8th step, his actions were restricted. The retired emperor had already expected this situation. The reason he had the seventh prince make a move was to suppress these major factions and let them know who was in charge of the North Star Ancient Kingdom. However, the retired emperor did not make it too obvious. Puff! Su Shun spat out a large mouthful of blood, and even cracks appeared on his body. He was like shattered porcelain. The Sky Rising Pavilion's ancestor finally arrived at the scene. Seventh Prince, you're too ruthless in your attack. The Sky Rising Pavilion's ancestor finally broke through the restriction and arrived at the scene, resisting the great Earth Dragon Shi. He finally managed to save Su Shun's life. However, in the Sky Rising Pavilion's ancestor's perception, Su Shun was clearly crippled by this attack. Even if he could recover, it would be difficult for him to reach a certain height. Fellow Taoist Su Shan's attack was too ruthless. There was nothing we could do about it, the seventh prince said with a cupped fist salute. I know the intentions of our North Star Imperial family. However, my sky rising pavilion has never been impudent. Why must you be so ruthless? The sky rising pavilion's ancestor voiced out the thoughts of the experts present. At this moment, he was questioning the retired emperor. This is merely a spar. Ancestor of the sky rising pavilion, there's no need to be so agitated, said the retired emperor. He looked down disdainfully. Faced with the words of the sky rising pavilion's ancestor, he was not moved in the slightest. I don't wish to argue with you all too much, said the sky rising pavilion's ancestor as he brought Su Shan away from the Mingyuan nunnery. No one blamed the Mingyuan nunnery. At this moment, they all realized the retired emperor's intentions. After a quarter of an hour, the seventh prince did not even bother to adjust his aura. He spoke again. I wonder which fellow Taoist is still conscious enough to spar with me. Some people were furious, but they did not dare to say anything. Several sky prides wanted to attack, but they were suppressed by the ancestor of their respective powers. This was a helpless solution. They all consoled the seventh prince. You still have a long way to go. There's no need for you to go up now. They all knew how ruthless the seventh prince was. If they allowed their own Qilin children to go up, they would at least be crippled. Now that the seventh prince had grasped the emperor's mark and the great earth dragon Qi, he was already an unparalleled existence among his peers. There's one more person. At this moment, someone recalled the person who had once slaughtered everyone in the Fuho nation. A few years ago, he had already reached the 8th step. He had killed many 8th step experts from major powers. However, this was only hearsay. They had never seen that person's true appearance. That was because the experts who had seen that person had all died. Thus, it was only a legend. Some people were filled with suspicion and jealousy. If that person is still in the Gaochen ancient nation, he should have also come here. I wonder who else is there. The seventh prince was now filled with arrogance. He looked down on everyone present. His gaze made some people feel extremely displeased. However, there was nothing they could do. After a quarter of an hour, Senior Old Holy Master, what do you think? Just as the seventh prince was about to make his request, a figure suddenly appeared. No one knew when, but a slender figure appeared on the scene. Chapter 1486. He was dressed in a plain white robe. Lin Yu of the Divine Court Organization seeks battle. Lin Yu's voice was calm. The scene fell into silence. After hearing Lin Yu's identity, they all held their breaths. Some of their mouths formed an O shape. Divine Court Organization. It was a taboo in the entire North Star ancient country. No one could mention it. Among the younger generation, they only knew about the legends of the Divine Court Organization. Now, they actually saw a genius of the Divine Court Organization come here personally. How could they not be surprised? Even the old woman's eyes narrowed. The pavilion master of the heavenly secrets pavilion no longer tried to hide it. He said, "That's right. This is the divine son of the Divine Court Organization. In the future, he will inherit the position of the Divine Master." His tone was neither servile nor overbearing. The old emperor's eyes were filled with intense, killing intent. The Divine Court Organization was his pain. It was a stain that could not be erased. The Divine Court Organization. The old emperor gritted his teeth. He thought of the acting Divine Master back then. Now that he saw someone from the Divine Court acting so brazenly and daring to appear in the world, the killing intent in his eyes could not be any stronger. The old woman immediately used the ancient formation of the Mingyuan nunnery to suppress the old emperor's aura. Otherwise, the entire Mingyuan nunnery would be destroyed by the earth dragon Qi. Old emperor, this is the Mingyuan nunnery. I hope that you can settle your personal grudges after leaving the Mingyuan nunnery. The old woman reminded. Although she was afraid of the old emperor, if she really went all out and used all her trump cards, it was still uncertain who would emerge victorious. However, she gave in just now because she did not want the Mingyuan nunnery's foundation to be destroyed. The retired emperor also knew this. That was the reason why he was able to pressure the old woman like that earlier. Imperial grandson, kill him, the old emperor said directly. Now, the murderous intent in his eyes was no longer concealed. As a core member of the royal family, the seventh prince naturally knew about the grudges between the North Star ancient country's royal family and the Divine Court organization. Lin Yu's goal was very clear. He wanted to stop the North Star ancient country's royal family from obtaining the three saintesses. Therefore, Lin Yu did not hide it. He directly revealed his identity as a member of the Divine Court. The war between the Divine Court and the imperial family of the Gauchian ancient country was unavoidable. The seeds had been planted a few thousand years ago, and it had only erupted at that time. The royal family had already begun to encircle the Divine Court. Lin Yu and the others naturally wouldn't sit still and wait for death. Lin Yu had not expected the pavilion master of the prophecy pavilion to directly say that he was a divine son. After all, he was only the acting divine master, which meant that Lin Yu's status was equal to that of the acting divine master. However, this was irrelevant. The expressions of Lu Rushi and the other two became interesting. He's finally made his move. Lu Rushi felt relieved. Yu Linglong's eyes were filled with a strange splendor. They all hoped that Lin Yu could defeat the seventh prince. However, they were worried about the seventh prince's methods. Even if Lin Yu defeated the seventh prince in the end, how could Lin Yu and the others escape when the retired emperor was eyeing them covetously? I hope that since the Divine Court is here, they have a way to escape, Yu Linglong thought with worry. Yu Linglong was relatively calm. She knew that Lin Yu wouldn't do anything that he wasn't confident in. However, they did not expect that Lin Yu had no intention of escaping after coming here. Instead, he wanted to fight the retired emperor. You can't. Lin Yu looked at the seventh prince opposite him and said indifferently. His eyes were very calm. When he said this, he didn't have the slightest bit of arrogance. It was as if he was just stating a fact. I know. You're the mysterious person who killed many experts in the eighth step in the country of Hu. The seventh prince was very smart. He immediately thought of Lin Yu's identity. However, after hearing Lin Yu's words, he became cold. The seventh prince also had a gloomy look. He inadvertently saw that the three holy maidens seemed to be looking at Lin Yu with hope. Although he didn't know why they were looking at him like that, in his opinion, the three holy maidens were all toys in his hands. He had been sitting on endless resources and status since he was young. He definitely wouldn't allow his things to be touched by others. Do you know that you will die by coming here today? The seventh prince said indifferently. It was only now that he showed all his strength. The third level of the eighth step. Everyone present was dumbfounded. He had broken through to the eighth step at such a young age. He was already a genius that hadn't been seen in generations. Now, the seventh prince had broken through to the third level of the eighth step. Although it was only a difference of 2 levels in the later stages of cultivation, even a small difference was a world of difference. It seems that the divine son of the Divine Court is in danger, someone said. They were very unhappy with the seventh prince's behavior. However, thousands of years ago, many of their forces had participated in the encirclement of the Divine Court. Naturally, many forces hoped that the seventh prince would kill Lin Yu. I'll give you a chance to make your move, Lin Yu said again. He crossed his arms in front of his chest, showing no signs of defense. You're very arrogant, but in front of me, you're just a clown, the seventh prince said. Facing Lin Yu, he didn't hold back at all. He directly used his strongest move. The earth dragon Shi below the ground rose. Roar! A resounding and powerful dragon roar directly broke through the clouds. Even the clouds in the sky were shattered in an instant. Raindrops continued to fall. You're not too stupid, Lin Yu said slowly as he looked at the old emperor on the high platform. This was because he could see that the old emperor was secretly involved in the seventh prince's moves. You're starting to be afraid. The pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion didn't give the old emperor any face and directly exposed him. Some people looked at the old emperor. They had all heard of the legend from thousands of years ago. Could it be that the old emperor was really defeated back then, and now he's starting to be afraid of the divine court? Is that why he's secretly attacking the younger generation? Someone guessed. The old emperor naturally saw the suspicion in the eyes of others. His face turned ashen. However, as long as he could kill the remaining members of the divine court, he didn't care even if he had to bear some infamy. Endless dragon Qi turned into a true dragon that was thousands of feet long. It directly attacked Lin Yu. The entire fighting stage was shaking. Cracks appeared like a spider web and spread far and wide. Even though the bright moon nunnery's array was protecting this place, cracks still appeared in the void and devoured everything. In the face of such a terrifying momentum, Lin Yu only calmly pointed out a finger. The sky became silent. Lin Yu used Blazing Heaven's move for the first time. He completely merged his superpowers and spells. The power of the 8 Great Void was all added to Lin Yu's self-created superpower, silence. The true dragon that was thousands of feet long stopped in the sky as Lin Yu pointed out a finger. Then, starting from the dragon's head, it disappeared inch by inch. This trend was irreversible. The 7th prince was horrified. Ever since he mastered the dragon Qi of the earth, he had never encountered such a scene. It had undoubtedly subverted his understanding. As the true dragon disappeared inch by inch, this was not the end. The 7th prince felt as if he was being enveloped by a mighty force. Then his body started to crack like the true dragon. The old emperor was shocked. He directly appeared on the fighting stage that was on the verge of collapse. He supported the 7th prince and used the strongest move of the 9th step. Chapter 1487. However, it was all for naught. The 7th prince's eyes were filled with fear as he screamed, "I don't want to die. Grandpa, save me." However, before he could finish his words, the 7th prince turned into dust and disappeared into nothingness. Hiss! Everyone present sucked in a breath of cold air. Lin Yu's means were too terrifying. One finger. It was just one finger. Even with the old emperor's help, the 7th prince was still destroyed. He did not even have a chance to resist. "You! How dare you kill my grandson?" The old emperor was furious as he watched the 7th prince's body turn into dust. A terrifying aura erupted from his body, causing the entire Mingyuan nunnery's mountain peak to crumble and collapse. Countless birds and beasts were killed because of this. Under the old emperor's fury, they were smashed into meat paste by the mountain rocks. Just the power of the 9th step was enough to cause mountains and rivers to collapse and the void to shatter. Lin Yu watched the scene quietly. He was not suppressed by the old emperor at all. "Old emperor, please calm down." Some people were so frightened that they could no longer withstand the old emperor's pressure. They prostrated themselves on the ground as their bones were about to shatter. No one had expected the situation to develop to such an extent. The old woman's eyes shone brightly. Invincible aura. Only an invincible person can become the divine son of the divine court. The old woman thought of the legend of the divine court. Even though the current lord of the divine court was the strongest expert in the North Star ancient nation, he was still not qualified to become the true divine master. He was just a proxy. It was enough to show how strict the divine court was. Although the old woman was shocked, she still activated all the arrays in the Mingyuan nunnery. "Retired emperor, do you really want things to get out of hand?" The old woman questioned. Even if they could not defeat the North Star ancient nation's royal family, they were still from the opposite side of the land of Evernight. Their strength was immeasurable. If they really made things worse and used all the resources in the Mingyuan nunnery, it would be difficult for the old emperor to leave. The divine son of the divine court has won. He is now the saint king of the Mingyuan nunnery. Anyone who wants to harm him will be the enemy of the entire Mingyuan nunnery. The old woman said slowly. Now that she saw Lin Yu's potential, she did not hesitate to offend the entire North Star ancient nation's royal family to protect Lin Yu. "I appreciate your kindness, but this old emperor can't threaten me," Lin Yu said calmly. His aura burst out and directly offset the old emperor's terrifying aura. The entire scene fell into silence. 9th step, 5th layer. Lin Yu was able to compete with the old emperor. How could the people present not know his strength? Merely, they had never imagined that such a young man would already be an unparalleled existence in the entire North Star ancient nation. How frightening was this? There was probably no record of this in the history of the North Star ancient nation. No wonder he could become the divine son of the divine court. Someone thought of the legend of the divine court and was shocked. The pavilion master of the divine, secret pavilion looked at the old woman and smiled. However, the old woman did not pay attention to him. The old woman was just following the rules of the Mingyuan nunnery. But now that Lin Yu had shown his true strength, he was shocked. The Mingyuan nunnery came from a mysterious place. There were many secrets that people did not know about. Lin Yu had reached the 9th step, 5th layer at such a young age. His potential and talent were unimaginable. Even Lu Rushi, who was usually calm and collected, had her mouth wide open at this moment. For a moment, she was at a loss for words and did not know what to say. So he has reached this realm. Sheng was shocked. You did not know that he had reached this realm. Yu Linglong came back to her senses and asked Sheng. Sheng shook his head. He is indeed the man I have high hopes for, Yu Linglong said. She had never been tempted by any man in the world until she saw Lin Yu. Now that the situation had taken shape, Yu Linglong had made the right bet. I did not expect you to have reached this level. If you had been a little later, I am afraid I would not have been your match, the old emperor said. Then he looked at the old woman and said, Is the Mingyuan nunnery so insistent on this? This is the rule set by the old ancestor. I have to follow it. The meaning of her words was obvious. The old woman, who was also the Mingyuan nunnery, had made up her mind to protect Lin Yu. If you had waited a little longer, the Gochun ancient kingdom would no longer exist. Lin Yu's voice was filled with dominance. If the Mingyuan nunnery was not here today, I would have killed you, the old emperor said. The Mingyuan nunnery's meaning was obvious. If the old emperor insisted on attacking, the Mingyuan nunnery would not hesitate to use all their resources to fight the old emperor to the death. There is no need for the Mingyuan nunnery. I alone am enough to kill you. Lin Yu said calmly. I came to the Mingyuan nunnery to fulfill a promise. I am not looking for protection. What a domineering man. Lu Rushi smiled sweetly. Both she and Yu Linglong recalled the night they spent together in Huho. Their cheeks blushed red. Now, they were worried about Lin Yu. In the entire Gochun ancient kingdom, there were only 3 people in the Gochun ancient kingdom, including Lin Yu. Let's fight outside, Lin Yu said directly. You are very confident. The old emperor's eyes were dark. Lin Yu did not waste any more words with them and disappeared. Then, he came to No Man's Land in the Gochun ancient kingdom. The No Man's Land was vast and boundless. Both of them stood in the void. Everyone, please forgive me. The Mingyuan nunnery has encountered an unforeseen event. It is not convenient for us to stay. The old woman cupped her hands. No one was in the mood to care about this. However, out of courtesy, they had to leave even if the old woman did not say anything. At this moment, countless people returned the greeting and disappeared from where they were. The battle of the 5th level of the 9th step was unprecedented. Many people wanted to witness it. Some of the patriarchs of the major forces directly dispersed their disciples and went to the boundary of the No Man's Land. They could see that the void in the No Man's Land had collapsed. It was like the end of the world. Even the patriarchs of the major factions were shocked. They did not dare to enter the No Man's Land and could only watch from afar. The old woman also came here. If Lin Yu failed, she would save Lin Yu at all costs. She already had an answer in her heart. Huang Cheng and the pavilion master of the Heaven Secret Pavilion came to the old woman's side. I didn't expect you to be a member of the Divine Court. Huang Cheng finally knew the identity of the pavilion master of the Heaven Secret Pavilion. He could not help but sigh. Now that they had reached their age, the past grudges were no longer important. Why? Are you surprised? The pavilion master of the Heaven Secret Pavilion smiled. I'm not surprised. I'm just a little surprised. No wonder you were always stronger than me back then, Huang Cheng said directly. He did not hide anything. Back then, they were both powerful suitors of the Bright Moon Nunnery Sanus. But in the end, neither of them succeeded. The two of them looked at the old woman. Obviously, the saintess of the bright moon nunnery was the current old woman. It's a pity that the saintess back then looked down on both of us. The pavilion master of the heaven secret pavilion sighed. "Shut up. You're all old farts," the old woman said. She frowned and looked at the fluctuations in the no-man's land. Now, only the three of them were at the 9th step and could get close to the battlefield. "Aren't you worried about the divine son of your organization?" The old woman frowned and looked at the pavilion master of the heaven secret pavilion. "He won't do anything he's not confident in," the pavilion master said confidently. After spending so much time with Lin Yu, the pavilion master of the heaven secret pavilion knew that Lin Yu was very calm. He had always been planning and would never do anything he was not confident in. "Is that so?" The old woman's brows were still furrowed. She continued, "Where is the acting divine master now? The retired emperor has already appeared." The divine master had always been elusive. "I didn't want to tell you, but now that we're in laws, I won't hide it." "The current divine master is doing something big," the pavilion master of the heaven secret pavilion said slowly. "You're still as annoying as ever," the old woman turned and said. "I'm telling the truth," the pavilion master of the heaven secret pavilion said. "Are you looking down on the divine son of the divine court?" The old woman had a guess. The divine court had come here 10,000 years ago and had never thought of ruling this place. It seemed like they had something important to do. This was similar to the bright moon nunnery. Otherwise, the bright moon nunnery or the divine court would have ruled this place long ago. The Gauchian ancient kingdom would not be able to resist. It was just that the hearts of the two forces were not here. Chapter 1488. You're also here for one person? The old woman thought of the deepest secret of Mingwen Nunnery. Mingwen Nunnery had crossed countless lands to come here just to wait for the appearance of one person. Now that she saw Lin Yu, a thought appeared in her mind. Perhaps the person they had spent countless years waiting for was Lin Yu. He was the current godson of the divine court. Perhaps the pavilion lord of the heavenly secret pavilion said slowly. "Don't say something I don't understand," Huang Cheng said with a frown. Huang Cheng's achievements could be recorded in the history of the North Star ancient nation. As a rogue cultivator, he had reached the level where he could be called an ancestor. It was enough to show his talent. Therefore, he didn't know much about some of the deeper secrets. "Watch the battle carefully. If Lin Yu can't win," the old woman said. She stopped talking to the two and stared at the battlefield. This hurt Huang Cheng a little. The pavilion lord of the heavenly secret pavilion wasn't that worried. He said, "The successor of the divine court is naturally invincible, not to mention the same realm. Even if the old emperor is one realm higher than Lin Yu, he can still defeat him." Soon, a terrifying fluctuation appeared. The old emperor was really like what the pavilion lord of the heavenly secret pavilion had said. After thousands of years of cultivation, he had improved a lot. He was now at the 6th layer of the 9th step. The pavilion lord of the heavenly secret pavilion was dumbfounded. He said, "Prepare the means of Mingwen Nunnery. Didn't you say that the successor of the divine court is invincible?" The old woman said unhappily. However, the old woman was just bickering. She didn't stay idle. Her hands continued to form complicated seals, carving in the void. At the last moment, she took out a petal that carried some kind of terrifying Tao law, which could affect the modern world. It had the power to cut down stars and reshape the Tao. The pavilion lord and Huang Cheng couldn't help but change their expressions when they saw the old woman's method. If the old woman took out this method, they knew that they wouldn't be able to withstand even a wisp of her aura. However, this was only used to protect Lin Yu. In terms of killing, it was still lacking. In the sky, in the shattered void, Lin Yu and the old emperor had already gone crazy. Even Lin Yu felt pressured when facing the old emperor, who was one level higher than him. At the 9th step, each level was a huge gap. So what if you've mastered the blazing heaven of the divine master? The gap between our cultivation levels isn't something that can be bridged by any mystic arts. The old emperor said indifferently, "Regret it. Today's ending was already decided when you were arrogant. It's still early. Lin Yu remained calm. Even though the old emperor was one realm higher than him, he was still able to defeat the old emperor. But he was not invincible. As blazing heaven executed his techniques, Lin Yu continuously destroyed the earth dragon Qi. However, the earth dragon Qi was endless. It was constantly emerging from the ground to support the old emperor. The dragon Qi of the earth was not cultivated by the old emperor himself. It was just a special technique that could draw out the mighty power of the earth and borrow it. When Lin Yu killed the seventh prince, he already knew a little about it. Die. The old emperor took the initiative to use his strongest technique. In terms of strength, there was a gap between Lin Yu and the old emperor. But in terms of techniques, Lin Yu was not afraid of anyone. Blazing light appeared in his eyes, one red and one white. Burial ice and universe fire appeared. At this moment, the entire no man's land was covered by this mighty power. Lin Yu walked out of the boundary between universe fire and burial ice like an immortal. 9 origin ancient words were imprinted in the void, suppressing the sky. What a terrifying power! The old ancestor of the 8th step was still retreating. In the end, he left the no man's land. Now, the entire no man's land was surrounded by universe fire and burial ice. The old ancestor of the 8th step could not withstand the residual power. Even the pavilion master of the Heaven's Secret Pavilion and Huangcheng were retreating in fear, especially when the origin ancient words appeared in the void. The pavilion master of the Heaven's Secret Pavilion could only use the tortoise shell to resist the power here, so that the 3 of them would not be threatened. Is this the power above the 5th level of the 9th step? Huangcheng murmured. He knew that it was impossible to reach this level now. But now that he saw it, he was still filled with yearning and shock. He can fight against the old emperor in the 1st realm. The old lady saw the specific situation of the battlefield through the Mingyuan Nunnery's foundation. She saw that Ning Yuda had used 3 of his trump cards at the same time to suppress the dragon Qi above the earth. At this moment, the power supporting the old emperor was infinitely weakened. What kind of technique is this? The old emperor was surprised. Do you think the dragon Qi of the earth is the only mighty power between heaven and earth? Lin Yu said slowly, holding the stone sword in his hand and calmly cutting off the dragon Qi. Impossible. The dragon Qi of the earth is formed by the blood essence of an emperor. How can it be suppressed by you? The old emperor said. Although he was surprised, the old emperor's face immediately turned cold. Even if you can suppress the dragon Qi of the earth, so what? My realm is still higher than yours, the old emperor said. A battle sword appeared in his hand, emitting the aura of an emperor. It seemed that the battle sword had been nurtured by the dragon Qi of the earth, and it already had a trace of emperor's might. However, Lin Yu's stone sword had become a supreme weapon a long time ago. Even now, it was difficult for him to use all of its power. It was enough to fight against the old emperor. Qi! The 2 swords collided, and the void was destroyed inch by inch. Both of them retreated at the same time. The void was trampled by them and collapsed. Like a mirror, it kept shattering. It was just a short retreat, and soon, the 2 of them were fighting again. It's a pity that my blood essence has dried up. Otherwise, I would have already killed you. The old emperor's heart was filled with a trace of surprise. He realized that he was obviously 1 level higher than Lin Yu, but he couldn't completely suppress him. The 2 of them exchanged a few more moves. As time went by, the old emperor was shocked to discover that his own source energy was actually fading away. Even his cultivation level was also falling. It's the stone sword in your hand, the old emperor said in surprise. You're not stupid, Lin Yu said indifferently. However, he didn't give the old emperor any chance. Holding the stone sword, he stepped forward again. His divine will had already blocked all of the old emperor's escape routes. In the ruins, he had absorbed the origin of more than 10 experts from unknown places. His divine will had already reached the peak of the 6th level, and it was much stronger than the old emperor's. Now, Lin Yu was constantly attacking. The old emperor couldn't dodge, and he could only take it head-on. However, Every time they clashed, a portion of his source energy would be cut off. If this continued for a long time, his cultivation level might even drop. And this trend was irreversible. The origin represented everything, and in the end, the old emperor had no way to restore it. "You're courting death," the old emperor shouted. Chapter 1489. The battle sword in his hand glowed as he used all of his strength to force Lin Yu to retreat a distance. But it only took a moment. Lin Yu used the world's end near at hand and closed in on the old emperor in a flash. "It's just one realm. I've cut through it before," Lin Yu said calmly. Back when he was in the land of origin, it was common for him to fight opponents of a higher realm, although he couldn't use the fruit of Dao now. Now, his realm was almost the same as when he was in the land of origin. Along the way, Lin Yu had experienced countless life and death battles. Even the old emperor couldn't compare to him. Hiss! Lin Yu cut off the old emperor's jade crown with his sword. His white hair fell down. The old emperor looked extremely embarrassed. At this moment, he found that his realm had fallen to the peak of the 5th level. The gap between their realms had become very small. When he was in the 6th level, he found it difficult to suppress Lin Yu. Now that his realm had fallen, his defeat was certain. "No, I don't believe it. The master of the divine court could suppress me back then. Now, he's just a latecomer. How can he make me so embarrassed?" The old emperor thought of the unbearable past. But even when he was besieging the divine court, he hadn't been so embarrassed. At that time, he joined forces with others and hurt the acting divine lord. That was why the divine court had been in hiding for so long. But now, such a talent had appeared in the divine court. He seemed to have appeared out of nowhere without the slightest warning. When Lin Yu appeared, he already had such combat strength. This was something the old emperor didn't expect. When Lin Yu fought with the outside world, he was confident of victory. He thought he could kill a major force of the divine court in advance. But now he found that he was wrong, very wrong. Lin Yu was an invincible existence. Whether it was his combat experience or the use of magic arts, he had reached a level that the old emperor had never heard of before. The methods he used were especially terrifying. They could suppress the Earth's dragon energy. He couldn't use it. This was undoubtedly terrifying. The old emperor kept roaring. His chest was pierced through by Lin Yu, extremely far away. Why is the old emperor's chi so weak? The old woman was shocked when she saw the scene reflected in the mirror. Lin Yu actually managed to injure the old emperor with a lower cultivation level. Blood splattered on the ground, dyeing a large area red. No, the old emperor's cultivation has dropped. The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion noticed this through the tortoise shell. Is it because of the old emperor's age? The reason for the drying up of his chi and blood? Huangcheng was puzzled. "No, Lin Yu used some sort of method," the old woman said. Both of them nodded. The old emperor's 6th-layer realm was very stable. He had already shown it in the previous battle. Logically speaking, it was impossible for him to fall. Furthermore, this drop in cultivation level was definitely not because Lin Yu had used some sort of method to temporarily suppress it. It was a true drop, the kind that could not be repaired. A part of the old emperor's origin was cut off. The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion was shocked. He had used the tortoiseshell's power to deduce this fact. After consuming a lot of energy, he finally found out the truth. The other two people were extremely shocked when they heard the pavilion master's words. The old emperor's chest was red, making him look miserable. He finally realized that he was now an arrow at the end of its flight. If he continued to fight, he might die. At that time, the entire Gauchian ancient country would be destroyed. I won't allow this to happen. The old emperor's face gradually turned ferocious. His entire body was shrouded in golden blood essence. The battle sword in his hand was shattered in an instant. The old emperor didn't hesitate to damage his origin and used a forbidden technique. Lin Yu retreated a distance. He knew that the old emperor wanted to escape. The power in his hand was constantly gathering. The 100-fold power of the God King's order suddenly appeared. Together with blazing heaven's power, Lin Yu used his strongest attack. Just as the old emperor was about to leave with the fragments of the battle's sword, Lin Yu's attack almost cut off time and space. He had seriously injured the old emperor once again. However, the old emperor's forbidden technique was so powerful that even Lin Yu couldn't completely stop it. He could only let it go. However, the old emperor was almost crippled. His realm would probably drop by a few levels. In the end, he couldn't pose a threat. Lin Yu withdrew the universe fire and burial ice. The origin ancient character also dissipated in the void. The battlefield fell into silence. Everyone was incomparably shocked. They couldn't sense what exactly happened. However, when all the fluctuations dissipated, Lin Yu's figure was standing in the desolated void. The aura on his body was still blazing. Although he had consumed a lot of energy in the battle with the old emperor, he recovered quickly with the help of the God King's order. The divine son of the divine court. The old monsters and the big forces murmured in low voices. Many people didn't dare to stay any longer and left directly. Some of them had participated in the encirclement of the divine court. If Lin Yu wanted to settle the score now, none of them would be able to escape. The divine court is now at its peak. I'm afraid there's no need to continue lying low. Let's find an opportunity to apologize in person, someone said. The divine son of the divine court could already suppress the old emperor. Now, there was also a divine master. No one in the entire Gauchian ancient country dared to provoke the divine court, no matter how high the price. Some people couldn't help but sigh at the thought. They had already made up their minds and prepared for the worst. After an hour, the void in the no man's land still hadn't recovered. The land was in ruins. It was like the end of the world. The pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion and the other two came to Lin Yu's side. I didn't expect you to be able to defeat the old emperor. The old woman had already retrieved one of the Mingyuan nunnery's trump cards. Although Lin Yu was in the middle of the battle, he still sensed the old woman's means in the distance. Although it didn't work in the end, he still felt grateful to the old woman. After all, the old woman had such a kind heart. Since the battle has been settled, why don't the divine son of the divine court come to the Mingyuan nunnery to discuss the next matters? The old woman invited. No problem. The pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion replied. Huang Qingdu was speechless. The pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion was still like this. They returned to the Mingyuan nunnery. Lu Rushi and the others came out to welcome them. The holy master of the Mingyuan nunnery was ashamed and could only follow the old woman. They came to the main hall. Lin Yu's strength was obvious to all. Now, Lin Yu had become the holy king of the Mingyuan nunnery. In terms of status, he was equal to the old woman. In terms of strength, even the old woman was not qualified to sit next to Lin Yu. Three holy maidens, why are you in such a hurry? Go back to the temple in the backyard. The old woman looked at the three holy maidens and said faintly. Lu Rushi and the others realized that this was rude and quickly took their leave. Chapter 1490. Never would I have thought that I would be able to see such a genius in the North Star ancient nation. This is something that even this old one did not expect. The old woman smiled. They knew that they had offended the Gauchian ancient kingdom. However, neither the Mingyuan nunnery nor the godly court were afraid of the Gauchian ancient kingdom's royal family. Now that the two sides had formed an alliance, the Gauchian ancient kingdom's royal family had no hope. Lin Yu cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for your help just now." The old woman waved her hands and said, "We were just watching the battle." The old woman was telling the truth. They couldn't join the battle between Lin Yu and the old emperor. They could only watch from afar. Now that the battle had ended, the old woman only mentioned it briefly. The most important thing now was the marriage of the three saintesses. Godson Lin, what do you think? When will you have time to marry the three saintesses? The old woman asked with a smile. I don't think it's necessary. Time is tight, Lin Yu said. He wasn't an irresponsible person. Since he had done it to Lu Rushi and Yuling Long, he had to be responsible. However, Lin Yu didn't know what to do now. His heart didn't belong to this world. He would leave one day. Therefore, he didn't want to waste too much time here. If that's the case, the old woman was in a difficult position. The pavilion master also understood Lin Yu's meaning. He said, "The god's son is ambitious. He doesn't want to be tied down by love. Moreover, he's at a critical moment now. I'm afraid he can't leave." The pavilion master explained to the old woman, "If that's the case, why don't we pick a day for the wedding? It'll only delay the god's son for a few days. We don't have to announce it to the world. We could just hold it in the Mingyuan nunnery," the old woman said. The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion said in a sad tone, "Back then, you did not even care so much about yourself." The old woman rolled her eyes at the pavilion master. However, she didn't pay too much attention to the pavilion master. Instead, he looked at Lin Yu, wanting to discuss with him. After all, Lin Yu's strength had already exceeded the old woman's expectations. Right now, Lin Yu is the strongest existence in the entire North Star ancient nation. To be able to reach this stage at such a young age, be it in terms of opportunity or talent, it was likely to be incomparable. Such a person was destined to soar into the sky in one go. When the time came, he would likely have a place for himself on the other side of the Evernight land. If that's the case, that's fine too. Lin Yu sighed in his heart and said, "But I want to tell you something. I'm already married." The old woman was silent for a moment, but then she smiled and said, "It's normal for experts to have multiple wives and concubines. My Mingyuan nunnery has never cared too much about these things." At this point, Lin Yu nodded. After what he had done to the two Sanuses, there was nothing he could do to delay it. "Since that's the case, it's decided," the old woman said. Soon, the Mingyuan nunnery began to set up the venue. In less than half a day, red silk could be seen everywhere. The next day, Lin Yu had already changed into a red robe. His slender figure stood on the peak of the Mingyuan nunnery. The entire Mingyuan nunnery did not have the slightest bit of silence because of the battle a few days ago. The place was filled with joy and peace. After all, everyone had seen Lin Yu's combat strength. The people in the Mingyuan nunnery did not have any opinions about Lin Yu. In the main hall, it was unknown how some factions got the news. Some people came here and prepared a big gift to congratulate them. Most of them were rare divine items in the North Star ancient nation. They were priceless. Even some 8-step experts would be jealous of them. However, most of the people who came here were the old ancestors of the major factions. Their faces were filled with respect. After hearing that the Mingyuan nunnery was not going to make a big fuss and invite everyone to a banquet, they were not angry. After congratulating them, they left. However, they still asked the disciples of the Mingyuan nunnery to pass on the message that the old ancestors of the various factions had come personally. Most of them were people who had besieged the Divine Court organization. Now, their attitude had made some things clear. Because of Lin Yu's appearance, the Divine Court organization had made everyone tremble in fear. He was someone who could rival the old emperor. Don't forget that there was a mysterious expert in the Divine Court organization, the acting Divine Lord. If the two of them appeared at the same time, all the factions in the North Star ancient nation would not be able to escape destruction. Especially now that Lin Yu, the divine son of the Divine Court, was married to the Mingyuan nunnery. Both of them were factions from outside the land of Evernight. Their foundations were unimaginable. Now, they were added together. They might not be interested in the North Star ancient nation. If they wanted to settle the score, who could stop them? This was a huge problem. Therefore, those who knew about it, including the old ancestors of the various factions, had come personally and paid a huge price. Even if they were from a major faction, they had sacrificed a lot for the sake of congratulatory gifts to show their sincerity. After Lin Yu learned about it, he did not say much. He only asked the pavilion lord of the divine secret pavilion to help him. As for what to do next, it was up to the pavilion lord. Huang Cheng originally wanted to leave, but he was stopped by the pavilion master of the secret pavilion. In the end, Huang Cheng gritted his teeth and gave a congratulatory gift. It was an ancient scroll from the land of Evernight. It was priceless and might be related to the other side of the land of Evernight. The pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion naturally kept it for Lin Yu. Along with the sound of gongs and drums, the entire Mingyuan nunnery was shrouded in a layer of festive light. The three saintesses were wearing phoenix crowns. Each of them had their own merits, but they were all incomparably beautiful. As the saintesses of the Mingyuan nunnery who had not appeared for several generations, they were undoubtedly peerless beauties. At this moment, they all came to the main hall. They entered the main hall together with Lin Yu. In the main hall, the pavilion lord of the divine secret pavilion, Huang Cheng, and the elders and deacons of the Mingwen nunnery were present. Lu Rushi and the other two had bead curtains covering their faces, giving them a kind of hazy beauty. They were like fairies, graceful and graceful. The old woman held the ceremony. At some point, the lord of the divine court had also come here. He was sitting on the high platform. "Greetings, divine lord." The pavilion lord of the divine secret pavilion immediately knelt on the ground. So did Sheng. "Rise," the divine lord said with a smile. Lu Yu also looked at Lin Yu and nodded. Their auras seemed to be in disorder. They had come here in a hurry. "Greetings, divine lord," the old woman said. When she saw Crow, she recalled something. Recalling something recorded in the ancient books, he bowed to Crow and said, "Greetings, senior." "You're not bad. You have a good eye," Crow said. The pavilion lord of the divine secret pavilion stood up and couldn't help but ask, "Divine lord, why have you two come here?" The divine lord and Lu Yu had gone to do something big. He didn't know if it was good or bad that they had returned. It's nothing important. On this joyous occasion, I want to announce that the current position of the divine lord will be taken over by Lin Yu, the acting divine lord said. As soon as he said this, everyone in the Mingwen nunnery was shocked. They all knew that the acting divine lord was still at his peak. His abdication at this time was undoubtedly very puzzling. "I'm just an agent. Now that someone is qualified to be the divine lord, I will naturally abdicate," the acting divine lord said. He didn't care about his status at all. Lin Yu looked at the acting divine lord. "Divine lord," Lin Yu didn't finish his words. The acting divine lord raised his hand, indicating that he had made up his mind. "Only you are qualified to be the divine lord," the acting divine lord said. Chapter 1491. "Kid, you can do it," Lu Yu said. Lin Yu would never refer to old people as senior. However, he knew that Lu Yu had lived for a much longer period of time than Lin Yu. However, Lin Yu could not refuse at this point. "In that case, I can't refuse. However, I still want you and the acting divine lord to continue to preside over the situation," Lin Yu said slowly. Lu Yu and the acting divine lord nodded. After the wedding, the bridal chamber was filled with candles. The candlelight was bright. After Lin Yu and Lu Yu drank, they entered the room. The three holy maidens carried out their duties and prepared everything for Lin Yu. Lin Yu sat on the stool and looked at the three beautiful faces. He said calmly, "My heart has never been in this world. Are you willing to leave with me in the future? Since we are married to the Divine Lord, we are willing to accompany you for life. We will go wherever you go," Lu Rushi said. She had a slim figure. Now that the bead curtain was lifted, her almond-shaped eyes were charming. Lu Rushi was definitely the most seductive among the three holy maidens. Her figure was enough to make one's imagination run wild. Lin Yu nodded. "Husband, do you need a rest?" Lu Rushi asked. "Rest," Lin Yu said calmly. "I will leave tomorrow. You may have to wait for a while, but I can guarantee that if I'm not dead, I will come and pick you up." Lin Yu did not want to lie to them, so he said so directly. He had reached the 5th level of the 9th step. If he wanted to continue to progress, he had to consider absorbing the gray substance. There were all kinds of dangers in it, so he would not bring the three of them with him. Lu Rushi blew out the candlelight with her pink lips. The clouds covered the bright moon. As the candlelight was extinguished, the entire Mingwen nunnery fell into silence. Mingwen nunnery was a place for Buddhist cultivation, but their Tao was different. In every room, there was a Buddhist shrine. The bodhisattva inside looked merciful. "Husband, let me help you change your clothes," Lu Rushi said shyly. "Haven't we already done these things before? What's there to be shy about?" Lin Yu looked at Lu Rushi, who was blushing, and put his arm around her waist. Maybe it's because there are no bars, Yuling Long said. Although her personality was cold, now that she was married, she was not so reserved. At this moment, she made a direct suggestion. After a few glasses of wine, "Third junior sister, there's no need to be so reserved," Yuling Long said. They lay on the bed and saw Sheng alone in the corner. They couldn't help but giggle. This. The relationship between Sheng and Lin Yu was unclear. At first, Lin Yu thought that Sheng was a man. However, he did not expect that Sheng's real identity was the Holy Virgin of the Mingyuan Nunnery. "My third junior sister is no ordinary person," Lu Rushi said with a smile. As she spoke, she and Yuling Long stepped forward and pulled Sheng over. The night passed quickly. Boundless scenery and charm. The next morning, the sound of blood gushing could be heard. The three holy virgins bathed and changed Lin Yu's clothes. Lin Yu changed into a white robe. At this moment, he appeared in the main hall of the Mingyuan Nunnery. The three holy virgins also tied up their hair and watched Lin Yu leave. After bidding farewell to the Mingyuan Nunnery, Sheng left under the envious gazes of Lu Rushi and Yuling Long. After bidding farewell to the old holy master of the Mingyuan Nunnery, he left with the acting divine master and the others. They came to a main hall hidden in the void. This was the real stronghold of the divine court. The temple had a sense of vicissitudes. One could see that there were many traces of great battles on it. However, the main hall had never been destroyed. Now, in Lin Yu's realm, he could clearly sense that this main hall might have broken through the 10th step. It might have been created by a forbidden expert. This also denied that the divine court was founded by his first ancestor. However, there was a shadow of his first ancestor in it. This was because Lin Yu sensed the space-time Tao law in the main hall. Moreover, the power of the Tao law on it was the same as what Lin Yu had comprehended. There were only slight differences. In Lin Yu's body, the main hall made of jade that he had obtained from the Su family was emitting a sparkling light at this moment. The space-time Tao law on it began to emit a rich light. It didn't take long for the Jade Palace to be completely restored. Lin Yu could clearly sense that the power of the space-time Tao on it was far more profound than what he had comprehended. This might be caused by the different Tao laws in the world. After a simple perception, Lin Yu had a different understanding in his heart. However, he did not intend to comprehend it immediately. The most important thing now was to improve his cultivation in this world as soon as possible. He did not need to break through to the 10th step. Now, his body already had the strange power of the three holy virgins of the Mingyuan Nunnery. The problem of the bottleneck of cultivation had been solved. "This is the real temple of the divine court," Lu Yu said. He looked at the temple with endless sadness. In the past, he had once fought with that person. But now things had changed. The temple was now full of scars, and the divine court had already withered. Lin Yu nodded. "Do you know why I brought you here?" Lu Yu asked. "You want to tell me the real secret of this world?" Lin Yu guessed. "More or less, but it also involves the world you came to," Lu Yu said. Lin Yu was slightly surprised. What he did not expect was that the divine court actually had a certain understanding of the world he came to, which was the land of origin. This was undoubtedly surprising. He thought of the creator of his world. Now, he already knew that in this world, there were powerhouses who had surpassed the 10th step. For example, the owner of the Earth Dragon Qi, the legendary Great Emperor, and the Great Demon that he killed were legendary powerhouses who had surpassed the 10th step. It could be deduced from the realm of his world. If one had surpassed the path-severing realm, then it would be the path of departure, which was the level of the god of creation. Then, if one had surpassed the 10th step here, wouldn't he already be at this level? "What's the secret of my world?" Lin Yu couldn't help but ask. "Do you know that your world was originally a cage?" Lu Yu asked. Lin Yu nodded. In the past, the strange clan had said that they were all creatures in cages. He originally thought that they were referring to the 12 universes and the 10 great holy lands. But now, it seemed that not only the universe, but also the land of origin, was the cage that Lu Yu and the others spoke of. "But I can tell you that your world is definitely not a *T cage," Lu Yu said. "What do you mean?" Lin Yu asked. The world is divided into yin and yang. The world you are in is the yin realm, and this world is the yang realm. Lu Yu's words were shocking. Even Lin Yu couldn't help but be surprised. The world I am in is the yin realm. Lin Yu was in disbelief. Even though he had an amazing temperament and was calm in the face of everything, now that he heard Lu Yu's words, he couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. If the world I am in is the yin realm, then doesn't that mean that all the creatures in it, including me, are yin spirits and have long passed away? Lu Yu's words had already subverted Lin Yu's understanding. Chapter 1492. There is no doubt that this was extremely frightening. If Lin Yu and the others were dead yin spirits, it meant that the people around him were all illusory. Without a doubt, this was a denial of everything about him, including his very existence. Did you find that in your world? Tens of thousands of years is just a snap of the fingers. But here, a powerhouse of the 10th step only has a lifespan of tens of thousands of years. Lu Yu continued to ask. Lin Yu's eyes were filled with doubt as he slowly nodded. It's precisely because your world is the underworld that the flow of time is different. It's also because of this that the mystery of longevity is hidden there. Lu Yu said, the war organized by the divine court back then was also related to this. After saying that, Lu Yu sighed. The reincarnation path established by later generations is just a passage connecting the underworld and the yang world. After a moment of silence, Lu Yu's eyes were dim as he slowly said, in that case, I've already passed away. Lin Yu asked. After hearing Lin Yu's question, Lu Yu shook his head and replied, you can't say that. The underworld and the yang world are just relative. You can think of your world as the yang world, and this is the underworld. Since ancient times, even powerhouses who have surpassed the 10th step have not come to a conclusion. At this point, Lin Yu's hanging heart was relieved. However, there was still a hidden worry in his heart because he had deeply come into contact with the reincarnation path. The end of the reincarnation path seemed to be a one-way passage, and the place of origin led to this place. Could it be that the powerhouse who established the reincarnation path back then thought that the world I'm in is the real underworld? Lin Yu thought of such a possibility. Lu Yu nodded and said, that's right. The world you're in is more likely to be the underworld. At this point, Lu Yu had answered Lin Yu's doubts. He had come into contact with two worlds and had his own understanding. The place of origin he was in was indeed more like the underworld. Do you know why I'm telling you these things now? Lu Yu asked. Lin Yu shook his head, indicating that he did not understand. This conversation with Lu Yu was obviously far from Lin Yu's understanding. Now, his heart was not very calm. The calamity of reincarnation is about to appear. You may have come to this world by chance, and it just happened to be the precursor of the calamity of reincarnation. Lu Yu said. Lin Yu thought of why the origin fire was sacrificing at that time. Perhaps he understood something in the depths of the origin flame. His resurrection was not a coincidence, but a deliberate choice of timing by the primordial flame. The great reckoning might have already happened in your world, Lu Yu said. This was what Lin Yu was most concerned about. After hearing Lu Yu's was worldless in the end. He was not a person of this world. What he cared about was the 12 universes and the land of origin. The great showdown that Lu Yu was talking about might be related to the final black calamity. I need to return to my own world, Lin Yu said. Of the god of the family was of the god, but he was worried about his relatives and friends, so he had to go back. The beginning of the calamity of reincarnation is indeed there, but it is difficult for us to reach there with our bodies. Only you can solve it, Lu Yu said. This was the reason why he told Lin Yu about this matter now. It also happened to coincide with Lin Yu's thoughts. Don't worry. The god of his organization will do our best to escort you back. But with your current strength, I'm afraid it will be difficult to quell the first stage of the calamity of reincarnation. Lu Yu expressed his concern. The time he and the god of reincarnation was to solve the problem of the calamity of reincarnation. I need to reach the peak of the 9th step, or the 10th step, Lin Yu said. Now that he knew the god of was organization's intention, he didn't hide it and said, actually, I almost reached the 10th step in this world back then. But for some reason, I want to reach a higher realm now. Lu Yu looked at Lin Yu and nodded. You are very similar to the person I once saw. He seems to have come from your world, but he didn't stay for long and went back. He was the one who told me the path to that place. You must be talking about my first ancestor, Lin Yu said. He took out the space-time Tao law, which resonated with the aura above the temple. They were attracting each other, just as I thought. Lu Yu's eyes were shining brightly. That person was also an amazing talent. I originally wanted him to stay here until he reached the 10th step. But because of the outbreak of the calamity of reincarnation, he had no choice but to return. Now, Lu Yu used to have a close relationship with Lin Xian. Although they were beaten up many times, the two of them had a true relationship. First ancestor has passed away. He was suppressed by the black calamity of that era, Lin Yu said truthfully. Only now did he know that the connection between this world and the land of origin was so close. At the same time, he also realized that his enemy wasn't as simple as just dealing with a strange race. Do you know that there's a god of creation in the world I mentioned? Lin Yu wanted to know something from Lu Yu. Lu Yu's eyes became sharp. What god of creation? He is just a sower of a supreme force in this world. He might have modified part of the world, but he definitely didn't create it. Lu Yu said with disdain. But overall, he created most of the living beings in this world. It's not an exaggeration to call him the god of creation. What about us? Lin Yu asked. He wanted to know if he was also created by the god of creation. Your identities might be even more shocking. You have the bloodline of the human race left behind in the bygone era, Lu Yu said. Back then, he had come into contact with Lin Xian. But at that time, Lu Yu was already heavily injured and almost fell into a deep sleep. Therefore, he didn't deliberately try to understand Lin Xian. Now, he also didn't have the strength to understand Lin Yu's background. But one thing was for sure. Lin Yu's lineage wasn't the seed of the god of creation. The most important thing now is to increase your strength, Lu Yu said. He had already told Lin Yu about what he knew. Now, Lin Yu needed to quell the final black calamity. It was also a part of stopping the calamity of reincarnation. The two were intertwined. I need to go to those ruins. Lin Yu didn't hide anything. The thing in the gray fog of the ruins was the fastest way for Lin Yu to break through. This is also the fastest way. Lu Yu sighed. Then, he handed his black rod to Lin Yu. There were originally 49 heavenly Tao rods, but because of the passage of time, they were lost. Now, there are only 40 left. With your current strength, you should be able to control them and suppress the thing there, Lu Yu said. He didn't hold back at all. Now that his strength hadn't recovered, he wouldn't be of much use if he entered. He could only rely on Lin Yu. But that was enough for Lin Yu. Thank you. Lin Yu received the black rod. Then, Lin Yu settled down in the divine palace for a while. Later, he met with the people of the divine court. The divine court had already withered. Now, other than the divine master, only the pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion and another old man were at the 9th step. The divine court had less than 30 people. However, it was without a doubt that they were the strongest fighting power in the North Star ancient nation. But Lu Yu sighed. Their strength was insignificant to quell the final black calamity. This required Lin Yu to rise up. Half a month passed. Lin Yu bade farewell to Sheng and stepped through the gate to the land of eternal night alone. He didn't linger. His condition was always at its peak as he arrived at the ruins. There was no sign of the Nether Soldier here. It seemed that the Nether Soldier had been afraid of Lin Yu because of what had happened to him. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.